What does it take to erase yourself? To abandon a $40 million penthouse on Chicago's Gold Coast, a real estate mogul for a husband, and a life that looked like a masterpiece to the outside world? Chloe Davenport did just that. At 6:03 on a Tuesday morning, 8 months pregnant and carrying a single designer hold-all, she walked away from a truth she had been quietly documenting for over a year. She left behind a 10-carat diamond and one sentence on a piece of paper, a sentence designed to demolish a titan's foundation and rewrite everyone's destiny. But here is the variable no one calculated: the brilliant young architect who believed the city was already hers to redesign. She couldn't possibly have known what was coming. The mogul who could construct 100-story skyscrapers but couldn't build a marriage began to unravel in ways his immense wealth couldn't repair. And the wife who vanished was about to demonstrate that sometimes the most powerful design is a complete demolition. This is the story of a woman who remembered her own value, a man who appraised it far too late, and a rival who stepped onto a construction site she was in no way equipped to handle. The events that unfolded will stun you, empower you, and perhaps, just maybe, make you reconsider what it truly means to be strong. Stay tuned, because the blueprint is just being revealed. The integrated home system in the grand foyer softly announced the time. 6:03 a.m. On a Tuesday morning, as spring threatened to bloom, Chloe Davenport descended the floating marble staircase of the Chicago residence she'd occupied for 6 years. One hand held a small leather travel bag, the other rested instinctively on the curve of her stomach, protecting the daughter she had carried for 8 months. Their housekeeper, Eleni, paused while dusting a priceless sculpture, her expression filled with a genuine worry that transcended her professional duties. "Leaving so early, Mrs. Davenport?" she inquired, her voice kind with a familiarity Chloe had come to rely on. Chloe offered her a brief, genuine smile that Elena would analyze for months afterward. "I am. Thank you for everything, Elena. For all of it." A note of finality hung in the air, causing the older woman to hesitate. But before she could probe further, Chloe was gliding through the massive, custom-built front door. A prearranged car was waiting at the curb, blending into the early morning traffic, whisking her away from the $40 million property, away from the sterile elegance of her life, and away from the man who was enamored with her public persona, but couldn't face her private reality. 3 hours later, Julian Davenport stirred in the center of their enormous custom bed, his hand swept across the mattress, searching for his wife's familiar warmth, but only found the cold, empty landscape of imported silk sheets, lavish and lifeless. He pushed himself up, a frown deepening on his forehead. In 6 years, Chloe had never not been awake before him, typically with a cup of black coffee waiting on his bedside table, moving through their home with a gentle poise he hadn't appreciated in years. The quiet this morning was different. It was an intentional, deafening silence. "Chloe?" His voice, which could command a room of investors and city planners, sounded small and lost in the sprawling master bedroom. No response. Julian got out of bed, a sense of dread creeping in as he walked through the penthouse. In her dressing room, he noticed her favorite worn copy of an art history textbook was missing from her nightstand, a minor detail that sent a major shockwave of panic through him. Everything else was perfect. It was all so immaculately arranged, it resembled a luxury hotel suite more than a home. Downstairs, the morning light streamed through the panoramic windows, catching dust particles floating in the unnervingly quiet air. On the minimalist steel desk in his home office, propped against an award he'd received for Developer of the Year, was a single sheet of heavy watercolor paper. It was a nod to her past life as a museum curator. His name, Julian, was written on the front in her elegant, precise script. He reached for it. His hands, steady enough to close $1 billion deal, trembled as he unfolded the heavy paper. The message inside was lethally concise. I'm going to find the woman I was before I became your masterpiece. Our daughter deserves to know her. Placed beneath the note, its facets catching the light like chips of ice, was her engagement ring. 10 carats, a flawless custom cut, and now completely meaningless. Julian read the sentence over and over, his mind refusing to compute the data, stuck in a loop of disbelief. Gone where? Why? What was she talking about, their daughter, the woman she used to be? He grabbed his phone, his fingers feeling clumsy and slow as he tried to call her. The call went directly to a recording. The number you have dialed has been disconnected. He ended the call, tried again. The same robotic voice. Her sister, Olivia, she would know something. He called her, but was met with her bright, cheerful voicemail. It was Olivia, announcing she was on a 2-month artist residency in a remote fjord in Iceland, entirely off the grid and unreachable. The perfectly planned, strategic nature of it all struck him like a wrecking ball. Julian slid to the polished marble floor, his back pressed against the leg of his desk, the note still clutched in his hand. For the first time in his career, he felt a fear that had nothing to do with interest rates or zoning disputes. This was a deep, personal terror, the sensation of having the entire foundation of his life violently ripped out from under him. "Where is my wife?" he whispered to the empty, silent room. "Where is my daughter?" Let me show you how they arrived at this point. Let me tell you about the perfect life that was, in fact, the perfect lie. Let me tell you about a towering ambition that cast a shadow over everything it touched, and about a woman who loved a man so much she had to condemn the building of their life to save herself. Because sometimes the only way to build something new is to start with a controlled demolition. 48 hours prior, Chloe had woken up in that same bed, alone. The sprawling vista of Lake Michigan stretched out before her, a stunning backdrop for a life that felt increasingly foreign. She found Julian's note on his pillow, scribbled on a piece of his company's stationery. "Late one with the design team. Don't wait up, Jay. No good morning. No, how are you feeling?" Not even an "I love you" before the curt initial. 8 months pregnant, Chloe moved through their quiet home with a careful, measured pace, a hand resting on her belly. Their daughter kicked, a tiny, reassuring sign of life. At least she wasn't entirely on her own. She made her own breakfast, oatmeal with fresh fruit, exactly as her doctor recommended. "Good morning, my love," she whispered to her bump. "I guess it's just you and me again." Her phone buzzed with a notification for a new feature in an architecture magazine she still followed. The headline made her freeze. "Chicago's visionaries celebrate the lakefront's future." The featured photo was of Julian in an impeccably tailored suit, looking charismatic and dominant. He was leaning toward a stunning, dark-haired woman in a bold red dress. They were sharing a laugh, a look so private and shared that it felt like an intrusion to witness it. The caption identified her as Sophia Rossi, his celebrated head architect, Julian's protege. Chloe magnified the image, her curator's eye deconstructing the composition, the way his hand rested with an air of ownership at the base of her spine, the way Sophia's entire body was oriented toward him, creating a private world for just the two of them. And that's when the final piece of evidence slotted into place. The day before, while searching for some tax documents in his office, she discovered a hidden folder. Inside were the complete architectural blueprints for a breathtaking modern home on a private stretch of the lake. The project name was Our Haven, and tucked within the plans was a receipt from a private jeweler for a custom engagement ring, with an engraving specified for the initials S.R. It was the last piece of proof she would ever need. Chloe picked up her cup of tea, her hand completely still. She should have felt a tsunami of rage, a crushing weight of grief. Instead, a quiet, profound exhaustion washed over her. It was the kind of fatigue that comes not from a sleepless night, but from the slow, systematic dismantling of hope. That was the final artifact, she would later say, the final piece for the collection, because I was done trying to preserve an exhibit that was already scheduled for deaccession. I had stopped being the curator of my own life. She caught her reflection in a dark screen. Designer maternity clothes, flawless makeup, professionally styled hair. She looked precisely like the wife of a real estate tycoon, a woman whose life was a feature in society magazines, polished, perfect, and utterly vacant. I had no memory of curating that person, she remembered thinking. She was an installation pieced together from everything I'd run from and nothing I had ever wanted to be. But that exhibition was about to close, because Chloe Hayes Davenport had been quietly planning her escape for more than a year. In 48 hours, Mrs. Davenport would be permanently deinstalled. Across the city, in a sleek River North apartment, Sophia Rossi was on a video call with her own mentor, a glass of expensive champagne in her hand. He'll break it to her the second the merger is finalized, Isabel said, her tone ringing with absolute conviction. She's just the legacy wife, the beta version. I'm the one who gets his strategy, the one who grasps the true scale of the dynasty he's engineering. On her secondary display, a gallery of photos showed Alara at tech summits and charity galas, always impeccable, always slightly detached, with a polite smile that never quite ignited her eyes. She's elegant, I'll grant her that, Isabel went on, but elegance without strategic value is a net loss. And a man like Julian Croft doesn't need another piece of art for his collection. He needs a co-founder. She needed a partner who could challenge her pitch deck and stand beside her at a black tie gala. Isabel minimized the investment portfolio and opened a file titled JC Synergy Roadmap. It was laid out like a 5-year corporate growth plan, because in her view, that's exactly what he represented. Isabel had clawed her way out of a forgotten suburb, using scholarships and a relentless drive to secure her position in the cutthroat world of venture capital. Julian Croft wasn't just a man she desired. He was the keystone to an empire, the ultimate acquisition that would cement her place in history. Her plan was surgical. Phase 1, establish herself as his intellectual peer. Leverage her role as COO to become the only person he trusted with his unicorn investments. Convince him that no one else understood the tech landscape the way they did together. Phase 2, foster emotional reliance. Become his confidant for the immense pressures of managing his family's legacy, a role his wife, the quiet former architect, was clearly not built for. Phase 3, the World Economic Forum. Solidify their public image as a power couple. Phase 4, the uncoupling. Position herself as the unwavering ally when his marriage inevitably imploded. Every dynasty needs a successor. Isabel was certain it would be her. Isabel murmured to herself as she created a new calendar event. I'm merely expediting the inevitable. What Isabel could never have known was that Alara had vacated the role of Lady of the Manor months prior. She had already formulated her own exit strategy to disappear, to trade a gilded cage for a life of quiet purpose. The position Isabel was plotting to secure was already vacant, and the man she was targeting, he was on the verge of collapsing in a way neither woman could have possibly foreseen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind to the very beginning, to the day Julian Croft saw a design by Alara Vance and decided she was the next great asset he had to acquire. 8 years before Alara vanished, she was an entirely different woman. At 26, she was an architectural fellow in San Francisco, drafting blueprints for a small firm to cover her rent while creating her own designs that won minor, yet highly respected, industry awards. She debated with contractors over single centimeters and was fueled by the high of a perfectly executed concept. Her tiny studio was a landscape of scale models and blueprints. Her income was a joke, and she had never felt more purposeful. On a foggy spring afternoon, Alara was at a coffee shop with her mentor, an urban planner named Marcus. They were reviewing the plans for a community housing project. A corporate behemoth, a global firm called OmniBuild, had rejected it as commercially unviable. If they shelve this, Alara, a truly innovative vision gets buried, Marcus said, his expression troubled. Don't let them. You have something real here. Alara tapped the blueprints laid out between them. They're not going to stop me, she vowed. Good design will find a home. It did. A progressive design collective took on the project. Alara stood before a crowded room at a city planning forum, presenting her work and feeling the audience connect with every idea. The project won a prestigious local design award. Afterward, Marcus gave her a huge hug, his eyes bright. You see? You gave them something that mattered. She felt it in her bones right then, that profound satisfaction of building a world from an idea. That was her calling. That same week, still soaring from her success, Alara was at a university fundraiser for the School of Architecture. She wasn't an invited donor. She was the recent prize winner the department was proudly showcasing. She wore a simple navy dress, trying to navigate conversations where the guests' watches were worth more than her entire project budget. That's when Julian Croft made his entrance. He was 32, the dynamic head of a legendary venture capital firm, the heir to a San Francisco dynasty who was amplifying their influence with every deal. He had the intense, appraising gaze of a man who had never been told no. While speaking to the university dean, his eyes swept the room and settled on Alara. He made his excuses and walked straight toward her. The clusters of people seemed to instinctively part for him. Alara Vance, he stated. It was not a question. Your lighthouse project was a masterclass in social architecture. His focus was so intense it felt like it erased everything else in the room. I'm Julian Croft. Mr. Croft, she responded, abruptly conscious of the chasm between their worlds, her simple dress and his custom-tailored suit. The way the room's entire center of gravity had just tilted in his direction. You have a powerful vision, he said, but you're designing in the minor leagues. A flash of anger ignited inside her. I'm sorry? You belong on the global skyline, backed by real capital, not collecting local accolades. He said it with such confidence, as if he could see her entire career path laid out before him. Alara lifted her chin. And what leads you to believe I'm interested in the global skyline? A rare, authentic smile touched Julian's lips. Because every great creator wants their work to be seen, don't they? Not every creator's ambition is measured in square footage, mister. She trailed off intentionally. Croft. Julian Croft. And I'd like to convince you otherwise. Dinner. She knew she should refuse. She should have seen the red flags, the casual way he dismissed her entire world, the assumption that she was simply another talent to be acquired. But he was looking at her as if she were the most brilliant designer he had ever encountered, and after years of fighting for every opportunity, that kind of recognition was intoxicating. One dinner, she conceded. One dinner turned into two, then a trip to the Venice Biennale. It was a dizzying 6-month romance that felt like a fantasy. Julian introduced her to her architectural heroes, he debated the principles of her favorite designers, and he listened, truly listened, to her concepts. He gifted her a vintage drafting table, not jewelry, seeming to understand what she cherished. He met her mother, a city archivist, in their humble Oakland apartment, and won her over with his knowledge of historical city planning. As they were leaving, her mother clutched her arm. "Are you sure about him, Alara?" she asked, a line of worry creasing her brow. "That world. It can swallow people whole. Make sure you don't misplace your own voice in his." "He loves my voice, Mom," Alara insisted, believing it with all her heart. "He sees me for who I am. Just make sure he's still seeing you in 5 years." 6 months after they met, Julian proposed at the top of a skyscraper he had financed, with the lights of San Francisco glittering beneath them. The ring was a vintage piece, once owned by a famous female architect. Alara said yes because she believed she was stepping into her own perfect ending. Their wedding was a small, tasteful ceremony. Alara wore a timeless silk gown. She held a bouquet of calla lilies and felt as if she were entering a classic film. In the wedding photos, she is glowing, utterly oblivious that she was exchanging her career for a title, her voice for something more subdued, more appropriate, and infinitely smaller. The revision of a life is always subtle at first. Year 1. Julian was closing a deal in Singapore and was absent from the awards gala, where Alara's community project was nationally recognized. She accepted the award alone in their Pacific Heights mansion, sipping champagne and wondering why the victory felt so empty. Year 2. Alara told Julian she was starting a new sustainable design project. His reply came from behind the financial news. "Why would you take that on? The pressure to top your last project is enormous. You can run the museum's design foundation. You don't need that kind of struggle." "It's not a struggle, Julian," she attempted to explain. "It is who I am." "You have a bigger impact on architecture on my arm at these fundraisers," he countered. "Supporting the portfolio I'm building. That creates a far greater legacy than one small building." Alara let it go. She was exhausted from organizing a benefit the night before and didn't have the energy for a fight. That is how a story gets rewritten, by quiet deletions. Year 3, she attempted to organize a pro bono design clinic for local startups. Julian was busy, and when he finally took notice, his remark was offhand but sharp. "Darling, those aspiring founders will just bleed you dry. You were made for bigger things." Year 4. Alara stopped talking about her next project. Julian stopped asking. Year 5. Alara found out she was pregnant. She told Julian at breakfast, her heart aflutter with a strange mix of fear and hope. His face brightened, but his words landed like a cold, hard stone on her spirit. "Fantastic. A successor. Not a child. Not our baby. A successor. Another entry in the Croft dynasty. A character whose role was defined before they were even born." Year 6. Alara had become a phantom in her own architectural masterpiece of a home. She hosted galas, smiled for photographers, and slowly disappeared. The woman in the mirror was a stranger she no longer knew. At 7 months pregnant, Alara was cleaning up files on their shared home network when she stumbled upon a document synced from his cloud drive. Her eyes drifted over the text until the title seized her breath. It was a meticulously detailed document, formatted like a corporate strategy deck, and it was titled Project Legacy, A Strategic Transition. The author was Isabel Thorne, his chief operating officer. She sat there in the grand home office she never used, her old drafting table, collecting dust in the corner. She didn't cry. There were no tears left to spill. She closed her eyes for a moment, then opened a secure folder on her laptop. Inside, a single file was titled Project Exodus. That was 18 months ago. Since that night, Ava had been designing her escape with the meticulous detail she once reserved for a documentary photo series. She had perfected the role of the beautiful, static image in her own marriage, and now she would use that stillness to vanish from the frame. Every single day, she withdrew $400 in cash. Each visit to the ferry, Plaza Farmers Market, she'd ask for cash back, always under the $100 reporting limit. She slid the folded bills into the hollowed-out spines of old photography books, rolled them into the handle of a vintage light meter he'd never seen her use, and sealed them in an airtight bag tucked inside the cistern of a rarely used powder room. Liam never went in there. He barely registered her existence within their home. She established a modest savings account under her maiden name, Collins, at a small credit union in Oakland, a city he only thought of as a place to fly out of. The teller, a young woman with a kind face, gave her a look of profound understanding when Ava specified, "This is just for me. My name only." "I hear you," the woman said, her voice a quiet confirmation. She did all of her research on a cash-bought burner tablet, using the public Wi-Fi at a university library in Berkeley, always shielded by a privacy browser, always scrubbing the history clean. She looked into small, unassuming towns in coastal Oregon and the San Juan Islands, places where Ava Sterling would simply cease to exist, so that a woman named Maya Collins could finally begin to live. She bought a prepaid phone with cash. She rented a small P.O. box in a town in the East Bay she'd only ever driven through. She reached out to a contact from an old story she'd done on witness protection programs to help her create a new identity. She practiced the signature for Maya Collins until it felt more natural than her own. That signature became her reality the day she found out she was having a daughter. Liam's word, dynasty, had sent a chill through her soul. Her daughter wouldn't be a child, she'd be an asset, groomed to be the next generation CEO, not a person. Ava would not allow that to happen. She packed one waterproof duffel bag and hid it in an old Pelican case in the back of their sprawling walk-in closet. It contained sturdy hiking boots, a faded flannel shirt from her college days, the grainy ultrasound prints, her father's old compass, and a dog-eared collection of travel essays. Nothing Liam had ever touched, and certainly nothing that belonged to Serena Vance. Using the untraceable phone, she sent a carefully worded text to her brother. "Hey, I'm finally doing that big Pacific Northwest photography project we talked about. Going off-grid to get some real shots. I'm safe. Don't worry." Her brother, the one person who could read between her lines, would know exactly what it meant. 2 weeks before her planned departure, Ava had her final ultrasound, the one Liam had sworn he would attend to see the new asset. She sat in the sleek, minimalist waiting room, observing other couples. The men were focused on their partners, rubbing their backs, their attention undivided. Her phone vibrated. A text from Liam, sent 5 minutes before her appointment was scheduled to start. "Ethel is hitting a critical code review. Can't pull away. You understand?" It wasn't an apology. It was a statement of fact. The doctor's smile was warm but sympathetic. "Where's the proud dad-to-be today?" "Launching the future," Ava said, the words tasting like metal. "He's always launching something." The image swam into focus on the monitor. "You have a daughter," the doctor announced, her voice full of warmth. "A very healthy, very active little girl." Ava touched the warm screen, a single tear escaping and tracing a path to her hairline. "Hi, Ren. I'm your mom. And I promise you, you will know what it is to be cherished, not just optimized." That very evening, as Ava sat alone in their penthouse, watching the fog swallow the Golden Gate Bridge, Liam was having dinner with Serena at a private table at Benu. It was the same table where he had first offered Ava a partnership in his life. Serena wore a dress the color of a rare Cabernet. They spoke of Ethel, of their consolidated power, and of a future that had no room for a pregnant wife. "So what's the timeline on your domestic asset realignment?" Serena asked, swirling a glass of Japanese whiskey. "The moment the Ethel Series A funding is secured, the prenup is ironclad. She gets her settlement and disappears. And if she proves sentimental?" Liam's smile was thin and cold. "My legal team will make her life so untenable she'll be begging to sign." Serena leaned in, her voice like silk. "I'm not her, Liam. I won't be organizing charity functions. I'll be sitting across from you at the negotiating table." "I know," he said. "That's why it's you." They touched glasses, a silent toast to their shared ambition, completely oblivious to the quiet revolution being plotted across the bay. That night, she got the final piece of confirmation she needed. Restless, she had gone into his silent home office, a place she rarely entered. Months ago, she'd given him a beautiful, minimalist desk sculpture, a gift he'd barely acknowledged. Embedded inside was a tiny, sound-activated audio recorder. She retrieved the minuscule data card. Huddled in a closet, she put in her headphones and listened to the recording of their dinner conversation from just hours before. The recipient of his plan was not an attorney. It was Serena herself. The subject wasn't a transition, but a de-merger. It was a cold, strategic outline for her complete removal from his life, positioning Serena as his sole partner, in business and in everything else. The betrayal was no longer a fear. It was a high-fidelity audio file. Ava's past as a photographer who captured uncomfortable truths had been suppressed during her marriage, turning her into a silent, polished accessory for his life. She had almost forgotten the woman she once was, but hearing their voices plot her own obsolescence, that woman woke up. There was no need for a tip-off. Liam had narrated the evidence himself. It was brutally clear he would never protect her. The story was set. The final shot was framed. In 24 hours, Ava Sterling would be gone, and the perfectly curated world they inhabited would develop a crack. Saturday night, 10 p.m., Ava stood in the sterile, silent kitchen of the penthouse, 7 months pregnant. She was performing one last quiet act. She took a single framed photograph and placed it on the marble mantelpiece, a candid black and white shot of them in their first tiny apartment in the Mission, laughing, years before the first billion. She had given the staff the weekend off, needing the echoing silence for what came next. The air was still, holding only the scent of the sea and the city below. Her hands were perfectly still, a photographer's discipline, as her mind took a final mental snapshot of the scene. The necklace of lights on the bridge, the distant moan of a foghorn from 50 floors down, the crushing weight of her diamond ring, a flawless, brilliant piece of fiction. Liam came home at 10:30, not smelling of another woman, but vibrating with the energy of a successful launch. He was on his phone, his voice sharp as he walked through the living room. He did not see the photograph. "Serena, confirm the patch is live on all servers." "Yes, now." The board gets the metrics at 0600. Ava stood by the fireplace without a word. Liam ended the call and finally saw her. He glanced toward the mantel, his eyes scanning past the photo. "Everything all right?" he asked, his focus already shifting to his tablet. She watched him, letting the quiet hang in the air. Finally, she gestured to the frame. "I found this," she said, her voice steady. "From the Mission. Remember?" A flicker of cognitive retrieval crossed his face. He was searching his internal archives for a file that had been corrupted by time and ambition. Serena, confirm the patch is live on all servers. Yes, now. The board gets the metrics at 0600. Ava stood by the fireplace without a word. Liam ended the call and finally saw her. He glanced toward the mantel, his eyes scanning past the photo. Everything all right? He asked, his focus already shifting to his tablet. She watched him, letting the quiet hang in the air. Finally, she gestured to the frame. I found this, she said, her voice steady. From the mission. Remember? A flicker of cognitive retrieval crossed his face. He was searching his internal archives for a file that had been corrupted by time and ambition. Huh. Yeah. Long time ago. He had no memory of the joy, of the cheap takeout, of the promises whispered in that tiny room. He'd forgotten. Or, more accurately, he had never backed up the data. Ava looked at his face, capturing it one last time. The hard line of his jaw, the cool blue of his eyes, fixed on a screen, the complete and utter lack of her in his present. This was the only closure she needed. This was the image that would propel her forward when she walked out the door. After a few more moments of typing, Liam vanished into his home office for a series of calls with his engineers in Seoul. Ava took the photograph from the mantel, moving through the silent penthouse like a phantom, bidding farewell to her beautiful, empty cage. She paused at the nursery door, looking at the climate-controlled smart crib and the developmental stage-approved mobile. It was a room designed for peak performance. I'm sorry I couldn't make this place a home for you, my little wren, she whispered to the life she carried. But I promise you'll have something better. You'll have a mother who actually sees you. At 1 a.m., Ava set her plan in motion. She retrieved her packed duffel from its hiding spot. Her hands began to tremble. Every sound was amplified. The whisper of the waterproof fabric, the quiet snap of a buckle, the wild, desperate drumming of her own heart. The smart display on Liam's nightstand suddenly lit up. Ava froze, her body rigid. If he woke up, if he saw her standing there with a bag, the dream of freedom would shatter. The screen cast a blue glow on his sleeping face. It was a notification from Serena. Ethel is live. We are live. A small rocket emoji pulsed beside it. Liam shifted, murmuring in his sleep. Ava, you up? The drowsy question was the final chain she had to break. Just cross-referencing the server logs, she whispered, her tone a carefully constructed fiction. The baby's kicking. There's an app for that, Julian mumbled, his voice muffled by the pillow. Go to sleep. He shifted, already drifting back into a dreamless state, entirely confident that the predictable world he had coded would execute without error. It was an impossibility in his data-driven universe that a variable like his wife would choose to deviate from her established pattern. Eleanor remained motionless for what felt like an eternity, timing his deep, rhythmic breaths, waiting for the frantic overclocking of her own heart to cool down. Then, with practiced stealth, she slipped the encrypted hard drive into her worn leather satchel, waiting for the quietest hour before dawn, when the city's ceaseless noise would finally buffer. At 4:30 in the morning, Eleanor changed into faded black jeans and a durable canvas field jacket from her days as a reporter, an outfit that made her anonymous in a city of ghosts. She tucked her hair into a knit beanie, her face scrubbed clean of the makeup she wore like a mask. The woman reflected in the darkened glass of the window was someone she finally knew, not Eleanor Vance, just Ellie. She took a final tour of the sterile, minimalist apartment. She allowed herself one last, heartbreaking glance into the high-tech nursery. Her fingers grazed the polished chrome of the smart crib her son would never sleep in, beneath the data-driven mobile of holographic stars that would never twinkle for him. Downstairs, she walked to the sprawling granite countertop in the kitchen. She placed the wilted basil plant from the hydroponic garden, its leaves dark and limp, in the center. Beside it, she laid down a single, antique typewriter key. On the main screen of the kitchen's smart hub, she left a single, encrypted file that would detonate his entire life. The file was named data_corruption.zip. She placed her wedding ring, a sleek, biometric smart ring that tracked her every vital sign, next to the key. The custom device, a symbol of a corrupted code, reflected the city's distant, flickering lights. It was a cold, empty signal. Ellie took only one thing from that life: a small, battered reporter's notebook, not to remember Julian, but to remember the woman she had been, inquisitive and relentless, before she had allowed herself to become another one of his data points. "I won't raise my son in a digital cage," she whispered toward the silent master bedroom. "I'm taking him somewhere he can write his own story." At 4:45, Ellie stepped into the silent, automated elevator. The satchel felt impossibly light, carrying only the essentials for her new life. The elevator descended, each floor a quiet deletion of Mrs. Vance, and a step closer to Ellie Sullivan. The lobby, a gallery of glass and steel, was deserted except for the night security guard. It wasn't their usual guard, Arthur, but a younger man named Ben, who didn't know her routines. He glanced up from his tablet, a look of surprise on his face. "Mrs. Vance, you're out and about early." Ellie's pulse spiked. She hadn't accounted for this, for a human error in her perfect plan. "Just restless," she said, her voice even. Decided to drive up to the coast to watch the sunrise. Ben's eyes moved from her face to the rugged leather satchel. She saw a moment of cognitive dissonance in his expression, a feeling that the data didn't match the profile. "Should I signal for the automated car to come around?" "No!" The word was too loud, too sharp. Ellie softened her expression with a practiced smile. "No, thank you. A friend is picking me up. I didn't want to wake Julian. He has that big keynote speech." Ben held her gaze for a beat too long. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. He knew. He had to know something was wrong, but then he just gave a slow, deliberate shrug. "Okay then. Have a good one, Mrs. Vance." A generic sedan, summoned via a privacy-focused app on a burner phone, slid to the curb. Ellie pushed through the massive, heavy glass doors Arthur would have held open for her, and stepped out of her smart home and into the cold, damp air of a Boston morning. She didn't look back. The bus driver gave a tired nod as she hoisted her duffel bag up the steps. Conversation wasn't expected on the 4:45 a.m. route heading north. The terminal at South Station was a vast, echoing space of marble and steel, occupied by cleaning crews and a few solitary travelers. Ellie kept her beanie pulled down low, her gaze averted from the dozens of security cameras. At the ticket window, the agent was a young man with exhaustion etched around his eyes. "One way to Burlington, Vermont," Ellie said. The agent tapped at his screen. "That's a bit of a ride." "You sure?" Ellie felt a jolt of pure panic, a baseless fear that Julian's face would flash onto the news ticker above the agent's head. Or worse, his corporate security detail would appear to escort her back to her gilded cage. "Positive," she replied, her voice firm. She paid with cash, crisp bills she had earned from secretly freelancing as a fact-checker for an online publication. No digital footprint, no name, no data trail. The paper ticket felt like a passport to a new self. At a kiosk, she saw his face on the cover of a tech journal. Julian Vance, engineering a flawless future. In the photo, she stood just beside him, a beautiful, silent partner in his grand design. She pulled the beanie lower and turned away. A young man wearing a startup hoodie did a double take. "Hey, You look a lot like now boarding for the 5:15 express to Burlington at Gate 5. Ellie moved quickly, her body still adjusting to the new life growing inside her, the duffel bag knocking against her knee. She didn't breathe easily until she was in her seat near the back of the bus, tucked away by the window, obscured by the reflection of the terminal lights and a lifetime of being underestimated. The bus pulled away from the curb at 5:31 a.m., the precise moment a pre-scheduled email from her burner account sent a fake itinerary for a flight to London to Julian's executive assistant. As the Boston skyline receded into the gray dawn, Ellie felt a tectonic shift inside her. Not a system crash, but a reboot, a slow, quiet loading of a program she thought had been deleted. The woman in the adjacent seat, older, with the kind, sharp eyes of a librarian, saw the single tear that escaped and traced a path down her cheek. Running from a faulty program, dear? Ellie quickly brushed the tear away. Is it that obvious? 40 years ago, I ran from a tenure committee that thought my ideas were too radical, the woman said with a wry smile. It was the best research trip I ever took. What if this is a catastrophic error? Ellie whispered, the words barely audible. The woman's smile deepened. And what if this is the first line of code in a story that is completely your own? The bus moved north, carrying Ellie Sullivan toward a future that was both unwritten and liberating. Behind her, Mrs. Julian Vance was already a corrupted file. In their smart penthouse overlooking the harbor, Julian Vance slept, wholly unaware that his perfectly optimized world had just encountered a fatal exception. He would wake in an hour to a cold bed and an even colder reality. He would find the dead plant, see the antique key, attempt to open the encrypted file named data_corruption.zip, and begin a freefall that none of his algorithms could predict or prevent. But Ellie wasn't thinking about that. She thought about her child, stirring within her, safe, wanted, and finally offline. She thought about a future she would build herself, under her own byline. She thought about a small-town newspaper in Vermont she'd found online that was looking for an editor, one that had a small apartment available for a woman expecting a child. With no digital history and a new name, Mrs. Vance had been a convincing simulation, but Ellie Sullivan was about to go live. The bus chased the sunrise, and Ellie watched the sky slowly brighten on the first day of her new life. Julian's biometric alarm activated at 6:52 a.m. The blackout shades retracted with a silent, smooth motion, revealing the overcast Boston sky. His hand swept across the cool, high thread count sheets, a programmed gesture from 6 years of marriage, searching for the familiar warmth of Eleanor's body. Empty space. Cold sheets. He sat bolt upright, a flicker of confusion on his face. In their entire life together, Eleanor had never deviated from their shared morning protocol. She was as reliable as his morning biometric scan, as essential as the nutrient-optimized smoothie that would be waiting for him. She would be dressed, flowing through their routine with the silent precision he found so reassuring. Not this morning. Eleanor? His voice sounded alien in the quiet, laced with an uncertainty that Julian Vance, the man who could predict market trends to the microsecond, never felt. Silence. He slid out of bed, donned a silk robe, and walked through the sprawling, silent apartment. The bathroom was immaculate, her skincare products arranged with surgical precision. Her closet, an algorithmically organized collection of designer wear, was untouched. But her old, worn-out reporter's satchel was gone from the hall closet. A tiny, anomalous piece of data that sent an error message through his entire system. "Ellie, sweetheart," he called out, his voice sharper now, carrying an unfamiliar note of alarm. The penthouse was utterly still, the kind of silence that denotes a void, not tranquility. Julian walked down the spiral staircase, his bare feet cold on the polished marble. In his home office, the early light illuminated his massive triple-monitor setup, and that's when he saw it. A single, antique typewriter key sat where his security fob usually rested. Next to it was her smart ring, its indicator light dark and lifeless. He walked closer and saw the single, locked file on his main screen. The subject line in his inbox was just a blinking cursor, an empty void where a life had been. I went to find my own colors. Please don't come looking. Our child deserves a mother who can paint her own world. He read the elegant script on the small card taped to a large, empty canvas standing on an easel. It was placed in the center of the living room, a stark white void, his mind, engineered for market algorithms, failed to compute the meaning of the words. It was a data point he had never modeled. For gone where, what did she mean, her own colors? She was Elena Croft. She was his wife, the mother of his successor. She couldn't just liquidate her position in his life. He grabbed his phone, dialing her number. It went straight to a calm, automated message. He tried over and over, with the same null response her best friend would know she had to. But the number he had for her was also out of service, replaced with an automated text about a 2-month digital detox retreat in Nepal, completely off the grid, too perfect, too deliberate. Julian called his head of security. Eric, did you see Mrs. Croft leave? Yes, Mr. Croft. At 5:30 this morning, she took a ride share. Not the Tesla said. She was attending an art retreat in the San Juan Islands for a few days. She had one small suitcase. She seemed quite serene. Sir, very peaceful. Serene, that word, registered like a system crash in Julian's brain. Not distraught, not angry, not panicked, serene. Like this was a scheduled software update, like she had executed this move with the cool, calculated precision of a seasoned developer. Julian collapsed onto the minimalist Italian sofa, his hand crushing the note for the first time since a bad investment almost sank his first startup. He felt a deep, visceral error, message the kind that had nothing to do with federal regulators or hostile takeovers and everything to do with a core asset being permanently deleted without his authorization. Where is my wife? He whispered to the sprawling, silent penthouse. Where is my son at 9 o'clock in the morning? Sasha let herself into the penthouse with her own keycard. She'd had it for months. She was holding 2 green juices and wearing her ambition, like a designer suit, Julian. Darling, you totally went dark on me last night. She stopped abruptly, seeing him by the window, still in his silk pajamas. Looking like a defeated CEO after a disastrous product launch, in all the months of their affair, she had never witnessed him like this. Julian Croft was always a titan, composed, and in control. This man was a ghost. What happened? Julian held out the crumpled card without saying a word. Sasha took it, her brow furrowed in confusion, before her expression shifted to a barely hidden flash of triumph. Before she expertly composed her face into a mask of grave concern. Gone. What is that supposed to mean? Gone? She left, took our child. Just vanished. His voice was flat a dial tone. Sasha sat beside him, her mind already gaming out strategies and calculating next moves. This was her moment, the hostile takeover. She had been positioning herself for over a year. Elena was out of the picture, clearing the path for Sasha to become the new Mrs. Croft. She just had to manage this transition perfectly. Oh my God, Julian, the baby, is he? Okay, should we call the police and tell them what my pregnant wife left a piece of cryptic performance art and disappeared? She's an adult woman. Sasha placed a perfectly manicured hand on his forearm. Julian has. She seemed erratic lately. Pregnancy can trigger significant emotional distress. You know, sometimes even before the baby is born. Julian clung to the diagnosis like a lifeline. It was a logical variable. She has been quiet distant. We need to manage this quietly for her own good. If the media gets hold of this, it could ruin her reputation. They might paint her as unstable. The words were pure poison, crafted to protect Sasha's rise as much as his own privacy. If the world knew Elena had left, they would search for the reason. They would find Sasha. They would label her an opportunist, not a partner. Julian nodded his gaze, lost in the Seattle skyline, oblivious to the cold victory in her eyes. You're right. We'll keep this internal. What neither of them knew was that across the country, a journalist at a major tech publication was opening an encrypted file. Elena had sent a week earlier. The file contained internal documents from Julian's company, Aegis Dynamics, detailing a secret project for mass data surveillance. The documents that proved Julian Croft's firm was building tools to exploit user privacy. The documents that would soon prove that Julian's wife hadn't just left him, she had launched a full-scale assault on his entire empire. At 10 a.m., Julian was in his home office on a secure conference call. His head of personal security had never seen him so compromised. The facade of absolute control had vanished. Get me. Kincaid, the best digital forensics expert on the West Coast. I don't care about the budget by noon. Kincaid was sitting in Julian's office, a former NSA analyst with tired eyes and a legendary knack for finding digital ghosts. He studied the note with professional detachment. While Julian paced, your wife opened an anonymous crypto wallet 2 years ago under her mother's maiden name, Parrish. She's been making small, untraceable deposits weekly, a few $100s here and there, plus crypto earned from selling some of her early artwork. Online total amount moved over 2 years comes to just over $300,000. Julian stopped pacing. What she booked a seat on a charter flight from a private airfield this morning. 6:15 a.m. Paid in a privacy coin. It's a shared flight with multiple drop-off points in Canada. She wore a simple baseball cap and glasses, and she paid 2 other women to act as decoys. At 2 commercial airline counters, Kincaid swiped on his tablet, showing a blurry image from a security camera of Elena in a hoodie. Completely unrecognizable. Mr. Croft, your wife didn't have a breakdown. This was a strategic extraction. She has been living almost entirely off-grid for years. One single traceable purchase 3 years ago for a high-end digital art tablet. That's all total accessible funds. When she left were approximately $400,000 in crypto. Julian stared out the window. Kincaid. We ran a reverse image search on some sketches we found, sir. We got a hit from an online art community in Santa Fe. A critic praised a new digital artist named Eliza Parrish. The description of her artistic style is a perfect match for your wife's early work from her time at art school. He slid an iPad across the table, a picture of a woman. Her hair in a messy ponytail, a stylus in her hand, smiling a real, genuine smile. She looked nothing like the polished Mrs. Croft, Mr. Croft. Your wife didn't just run, she forked her own identity. This was a masterclass in disappearing. She's been coding this escape for at least 3 years. Mr. Croft, the words, hit Julian like a denial of service attack. Over 3 years, while he'd been building his empire and having an affair with Sasha. Elena had been planning her own system. Reboot. She had lived in his penthouse, attended his functions and slept in his bed, all while meticulously plotting to erase herself. Find her. Julian commanded, his voice tight with cold fury. I don't care what it costs. Find my wife Kincaid. His investigator looked at him with an expression that was almost pity, sir, when someone goes to this much trouble to go offline. They usually stay offline, and the family courts, they tend to side with the mother, especially a pregnant one, escaping a high-stress environment. I gave her the world. Did you give her space to create her own? The question hung in the air. Sharp and unanswered, over the next week, Julian's life became a living hell. Kincaid's investigation uncovered the complex architecture of Elena's secret existence. the encrypted wallets she funded for years, the offshore server space rented under her mother's name, the chain of virtual private networks that left a digital trail leading from Portland to Vancouver, but ultimately nowhere. They were always chasing a ghost in the machine. Julian stopped going to the office. He ignored his board's panicked emails and let Sasha's texts go unread. He spent his nights driving by the waterfront, parking near the small independent art gallery where they'd had their first date. He'd stare at the dark building as if he could will her to appear. Inside, an old artist, packing up his stall, saw him there one evening. "You look like you've lost your inspiration, friend. My wife is gone." The old man nodded slowly, his eyes on his own canvas. Sometimes a painter has to leave the frame to find their own landscape. The phrase echoed in Julian's mind. He started seeing his marriage with a new clarity, one not filtered by his own colossal ego. He remembered how Elena's discussions of color theory and technique had slowly faded into silence. He recalled how she, a brilliant art school graduate, had become just another acquisition in his curated penthouse. She had become less vibrant, less defined until she was just a faint sketch in their own home. He had done that. He had taken a woman who was a kaleidoscope of color and tried to mute her into a predictable, monochrome part of his portfolio. He had taken her incredible gift and smothered it with his cold, relentless ambition and the thoughtless cruelty of a man who had stopped seeing the person right next to him on day 12. Kincaid found the first real lead. It wasn't digital. It was an order for a set of rare, imported Japanese watercolors shipped to a post office box in a small town on Vancouver Island. Julian was on his private jet within the hour, desperate for any connection to the woman who had so expertly deleted herself from his life model. Leavenworth was a town of 2,000 people, a place where a newcomer was an event. The cashier at the gas station remembered Maya O'Farrell. A quiet woman, very pregnant. She'd bought a map of the Cascade Mountain trails about a month ago. Mentioned she was looking for quiet. Julian sat in his gleaming Rivian on a street lined with faux Bavarian storefronts, and he slammed his fist on the steering wheel. He just yelled until his throat was raw, until he had vented a tiny fraction of the fury and dread and profound loss that was devouring him. He was always chasing her ghost, always one step behind, always 1,000 miles from where she had been 2 weeks ago. Simone Reed was making the penthouse her own, a new smart bassinet here, a top-of-the-line air purification system there. Simone was systematically purging any trace that Maya had ever inhabited the waterfront penthouse. She consulted with an interior designer, outlining a vision of cold minimalism, brushed steel, dark wood, and integrated tech, a monument to ruthless efficiency. Mrs. Croft's artistic clutter is no longer part of the brand, she informed the designer with a flick of her hand, and once the legal dust settles, there will be a new Mrs. Croft. What Simone didn't know was that David Chen, Julian's co-founder and a senior partner at the firm, was watching her from his own condo across the lake. He was quietly reviewing server logs and project access permissions, tracing how Simone had methodically isolated Julian, becoming his sole strategic voice. David had been Julian's champion, but now he was forced to be his auditor, and the web of manipulation he was uncovering threatened to tear their entire company apart. The 21st day arrived. It was the day of the global launch event for Nexus Dynamics. Project Oracle, Julian's life's work, was about to be revealed. He was supposed to walk onto that stage as the undisputed visionary of the AI world. Instead, he looked like a man haunting his own success. He hadn't shaved, his designer black turtleneck was wrinkled, and his eyes were dark, hollowed-out pits of exhaustion. The investors and press in the front rows began to murmur. David pulled him into a dressing room. "Julian, we can kill the live stream. Blame it on a DDoS attack. You're in no shape for this. I'm fine, Julian snapped, his voice paper-thin. Let's just launch the damn thing. The presentation began with a palpable tension. Julian stood before the massive, glowing Oracle logo, an icon that looked like an all-seeing eye on the screen behind him. Ladies and gentlemen, Project Oracle will revolutionize. His concentration fractured. The keynote speech on the teleprompter dissolved into meaningless characters. The only words he could see were from Maya's last encrypted message. Our child deserves a father whose humanity is more valuable than his code. Julian? David's urgent voice came through his earpiece. The 5-year adoption rate. Are you with us? He staggered back from the podium, the bright stage lights making the auditorium seem to spin. 1,000 eyes were on him, a mixture of confusion and high stakes, impatience. We were all so sorry to hear about Maya. A prominent tech journalist called out from the audience, trying to be gentle. Is there any update? Something deep within Julian finally shattered. He stood, a raw, broken noise that might have been a laugh echoing through the microphone. You want an update on Maya? I'll give you an update on Maya. His voice cracked, climbing into a frantic register. She's gone. She vanished. I have no idea where she is. I don't know if my own child is safe. I don't know why she left. I know nothing. He tried to brace himself on the podium, his knuckles turning white. I had everything. I built an entire world, and she... The sobs took him then, harsh, violent convulsions that racked his body. The sound of his raw, broken grief filled the state-of-the-art auditorium. Julian Croft, the genius of Seattle's tech scene, collapsed against the podium and wept like a lost child. I don't even know if they're okay. What if they're in trouble? What if the baby... The 1,000 people in the audience were stunned into silence. They had come to witness the birth of a revolutionary artificial intelligence. Instead, they were watching the complete and utter public breakdown of its creator. In the VIP suite, Simone watched with a cold, rising fury. This was not the man she had aligned herself with. This sobbing, pathetic creature was not the titan she had gambled her entire career on. He was a liability. David walked onto the stage, his voice calm and authoritative. We are experiencing some technical difficulties. Ladies and gentlemen, the event is concluded. Please exit the auditorium. The audience filed out, their hushed whispers replacing the expected applause. Only David remained, watching as Julian sobbed, utterly broken by the absence of the woman he had treated as his most prized possession. I loved her, David, Julian choked out between gasps. I loved her. No, David said, his voice quiet but sharp as code. You loved owning her. You loved that she was beautiful and brilliant, the perfect human element for your sterile life. You never loved Maya because you never bothered to learn who she actually was. The words were both a diagnosis and an irrefutable truth, and they dismantled the last piece of Julian Croft's carefully constructed identity. That evening, he checked into a private wellness retreat in the San Juan Islands for stress, exhaustion, and what the paperwork gently called an acute personal crisis. Simone made an appearance, performing the role of the concerned, capable partner, but when Julian looked at her, he saw a distorted reflection of his own ambition. A person who coveted what he had created, not the man himself. It was precisely what he had done to Maya. Leave, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Julian, I'm here to manage things until you're better. You're not her. You will never be her. Simone's mask of control finally cracked, revealing the cold resentment beneath. She abandoned you. I am the one who is here, holding it all together. I know, he replied, and that's the problem. You are here for the company. She left because of the man who valued it all more than her. Simone walked out of the clinic, the future she had engineered with such precision now turning to smoke. And somewhere on the Oregon coast, more than 300 miles away, a woman named Anna felt her baby kick. She laid a hand on her stomach and smiled at the gray, misty ocean, completely unaware of the tech empire burning in her absence. Her focus was entirely on the new life she was building, one quiet decision, one salty breath, one determined step at a time. 3 weeks after Maya Croft disappeared from Seattle, a pregnant woman got off a bus in Port Blossom, Oregon. She was 7 months along, exhausted, and the roll of cash in her coat felt terrifyingly inadequate. The journey had been a miserable crawl down the coast, full of winding roads and lonely, fluorescent-lit gas stations. But she had made it. Anna Morgan was here. She took a small local shuttle into the village, which was huddled in a cove where the mountains met the sea. The air smelled of pine, wet sand, and wood smoke. Quaint cedar-shingled houses lined the few small streets, and a wild river emptied into the Pacific at the edge of town. It all felt quieter, slower, and infinitely more real than the glass towers of Seattle. Anna was turned away by 3 different motels before the harsh reality dawned on her. They all required a credit card for a security deposit. Cash, she was quickly discovering, made people wary. Not without a photo identification that they could scan, not without creating the very digital trail she had worked so meticulously to erase. "I'm really sorry, ma'am," the last motel owner said, his voice kind but firm. "It's just our policy for insurance." Anna found a bench by the seawall, her hand resting on her belly, trying to breathe through the rising tide of fear. She had planned for so many things, but this simple, everyday obstacle had never crossed her mind. The baby shifted, a soft roll under her ribs, and for the first time since she had left, Anna had no idea what to do next. That night, she slept in the old Subaru she'd bought with cash from a nervous kid in a Portland parking lot. The driver's seat was a torture device for her aching, pregnant frame. A wave of morning sickness mingled with the cold, damp air that crept through the seals. It was a horrific, waking nightmare. She cried without a sound, her palm pressed protectively against her stomach. "I'm so sorry, little one," she whispered into the fog-filled car. "I am so sorry. We will find a way. I promise." On the third morning, desperate and nearing her limit, Anna noticed a small cafe on the main street. "The Salty Spoon," read the simple, hand-painted sign. Taped inside the window, next to a menu of daily soups, was another sign. "Restroom for customers only, but a warm place to sit is always free." She went in, her only goal to use the bathroom, to feel a moment of dignity. The diner was cozy and bright, smelling of coffee and cinnamon. A woman with a kind, lined face and a thick apron watched her walk toward the counter. "You look like you've been through the ringer," the woman said, her voice gentle. "Just passing through," Anna murmured. "May I use your restroom?" "End of the counter on your left, honey. Help yourself." In the tiny, clean bathroom, Anna looked at her reflection. Her face was pale and her eyes were shadowed with exhaustion, but she saw something new emerging, a strength. She looked like a real person, not the curated, flawless accessory she had been performing as for years. When she emerged, the woman had a thick ceramic mug of herbal tea waiting for her. "Figured you could use this. No charge." The simple act of compassion was the thing that finally broke her. The tears she'd been fighting for days began to stream down her cheeks. "Thank you." The woman glanced over her shoulder, her gaze landing on the dusty Subaru parked across the street. "How many nights have you been sleeping in that thing, kid?" Amelia's head snapped up. "How did you know?" The old man began polishing the gleaming espresso machine. "Listen, I was a sous chef in New Orleans for 25 years before I opened this cafe. I know what running on empty looks like. It's got a certain taste to it. Name's Arthur. Amelia, she breathed. Amelia Vance. Is that your real name? Amelia didn't reply. Arthur just grunted. Fair enough. You got a place to stay? Not yet. I'm looking. I've got an apartment upstairs. It's no Four Seasons, but it's dry and secure. It's yours if you can manage the morning rush. The work will cover your keep. Amelia stared at the gruff man offering her a lifeline she desperately needed. Why are you doing this for me? Because about 30 years ago, I was sleeping on a park bench in the French Quarter, he said, his eyes fixed on a scratch on the steel counter. And a woman who owned a bakery gave me a shot. Just paying it forward. His gaze met hers, weary but firm. Are the police looking for you? No. A man who thinks he owns me is. That's all I need to know, Arthur said with a nod. Welcome to Cedar Ridge, Amelia. The apartment above the cafe was Spartan, with just a bed, a small table, and a window that looked out over the town square and the vast, pine-covered mountains behind it. But it was hers. It was the first space that belonged solely to her in almost a decade. Amelia cried herself to sleep that night, but for once, the tears were from sheer relief, a flicker of hope, and a deep, fragile sense of gratitude. The weeks that followed found a new cadence. Amelia learned to pull the perfect espresso shot, steam milk, and chat with the town's early risers. She was slowly learning the rhythms of mountain life in Aspen Falls. The locals were observant, but kept a respectful distance, noting the expensive fabric of her simple coat, her quietly refined manners, and the gentle swell of her growing belly. It's a funny thing about a place like this, Sarah, the owner of the town's only craft store, remarked one afternoon while restocking yarn. We all know everyone's business, but we're also good at knowing when not to ask. It's obvious you're escaping something, but it's just as obvious you're not trouble. That's good enough for us. At night, the old fears would creep back in. Jonathan finding her, the chilling, opulent silence of their Chicago high-rise, the image of him taking their child, locking her back in the velvet prison she had mistaken for a life. She'd wake with a gasp, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, just to feel the solid, steady presence of her daughter, to know she was still there, still safe, still hers. Sarah heard her one night and brought up a mug of herbal tea. The demons don't yell so loud up in the mountains, she said gently, but they do whisper for a while. I had my own set. It takes time to finally believe you're out of their reach. What if he finds me? Eleanor whispered. Honey, you're a pregnant woman who vanished into the Colorado Rockies. That's like trying to find a specific snowflake in a blizzard. You're safe. In her second month there, Eleanor met Maya at a community prenatal class. Maya was 6 months along, with a warm, infectious laugh and a spirit as bright as her hand-dyed scarves. You're first? Maya asked, taking the seat next to Eleanor. Yes? Is it yours? Number 2. The father decided his dream of becoming a professional rock climber wasn't compatible with diapers. The universe did me a favor, or so my therapist says. Eleanor let out a small, rusty laugh, a sound that felt foreign. I'm on my own, too. Maya's eyes were perceptive and kind. Running from a ghost? Is it that obvious? Sweetie, I'm a weaver. I notice the details. That handbag is designer. Your accent is pure Lincoln Park, and you flinch every time a truck backfires. Maya's smile was disarming. Don't you worry. I'm not digging. We've all got our baggage. After their class, they got coffee and spoke for hours about strange food cravings, the terrifying prospect of raising a child alone, and the monumental effort of building a new life from nothing. It was the most genuine conversation Eleanor had had in years, the first time she felt like a real person instead of a carefully curated asset. "You're good people, Ellie, no matter what came before," Maya said when they left. "You should stick around." "I think I will." In her third month, 8 months pregnant, a water heater in the bookstore's back room burst during an early, vicious cold snap. Sarah called Ben Carter, the local search and rescue lead, who also happened to be the town's go-to handyman. Ben arrived in a beat-up truck, dressed in a fleece jacket, with steady eyes and a quiet competence that immediately settled Eleanor's nerves. He fixed the heater, then saw Eleanor struggling to move a heavy box of new inventory. "You shouldn't be lifting that. Let me get it for you." Eleanor's first instinct was to insist she could do it herself, but there was a simple kindness in his offer that made her stand down. "Thank you." As he worked, Ben talked easily. He was born and raised in Aspen Falls. His wife had passed away from cancer 3 years before, leaving him to raise their son, Josh, alone. He built furniture from reclaimed barn wood in his spare time and seemed to know every person in town. "I'm making a wooden rocking horse for Maya's baby," he mentioned. "I could make one for yours too, on the house. Every new kid in this town deserves a proper welcome." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears, a mix of late-stage hormones and the overwhelming shock of such unprompted generosity. "Why would you do that?" Ben just smiled. "It's what we do. We take care of each other. It's what being a community is all about." 2 weeks later, a once-in-a-generation blizzard hit the mountains, shutting down the single highway in and out of Aspen Falls. That night, Eleanor's water broke. It was 1 a.m. The contractions were coming hard and fast, and she was utterly terrified. She fumbled for the small emergency radio they all kept. "It's time. I'm on my way. Just keep breathing." But the snow was drifting too high for any vehicle. Even the town's snowplow was buried. Maya finally made it on cross-country skis, a faint light in the swirling snowstorm. "Okay, Ellie, look at me. We can do this." Sarah heard them and came up from her apartment below the shop. "I helped deliver my cousin's twins on their ranch back in '95. Can't be too much different." A few minutes later, Ben appeared, having heard the chatter on his own radio. "My wife, we took a home birth class. I remember a lot of it. I can help." And so, Eleanor Hayes gave birth on the floor of a small apartment above a bookstore during a blizzard, surrounded by 3 people who had become her family in a matter of weeks. Maya coached her through contractions. Sarah boiled water and gathered every clean towel she owned, and Ben was a calm, steady presence, his quiet voice guiding her through the peaks of pain. At 4:16 a.m., as the snow piled in silent drifts against the windows and the wind howled through the pines, Liam Hayes was born, 6 pounds and 9 ounces, perfect, healthy, and safe. Eleanor held him, sobbing with a joy so intense it physically ached. "Hello, my sweet boy. Hello. You're safe now. Mama has you." Maya was crying too. "He's beautiful, Ellie." Ben came in with the small, smooth rocking horse he'd just finished. "Welcome to Aspen Falls, little man." Sarah placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Her usual practicality softened. "What's his name?" "Liam. It means strong-willed warrior, and it's a good, solid name." She looked at each of them in turn. "He's already so much stronger than I'll ever be." "Kid, you just had a baby in the middle of a blizzard without so much as a Tylenol," Sarah said. "I think you've got the warrior part covered." The next 6 months were the calmest of Eleanor's life. She worked shifts at the bookstore with Liam sleeping peacefully in a carrier on her chest. The town had quietly, completely, claimed them as their own. Hot meals would appear on her doorstep, along with bags of outgrown baby clothes and constant offers to watch Liam. Maya's daughter, Chloe, was born 6 months after Liam. The two mothers learned to navigate parenthood side by side, creating a bond stronger than any friendship Eleanor had known in her manicured Chicago life. They pushed strollers along mountain trails, spent evenings on Maya's porch, and built a new existence based on kindness and resilience. Ben was a frequent, gentle presence, fixing things that weren't broken, bringing over venison stew for dinner, and reading picture books to Liam. One evening, sitting around a fire pit while Liam slept, Ben turned to her. "I don't know what you were running from, but I don't think it can find you up here." They were sitting so close she could feel the warmth from his arm. He moved just a fraction closer, and Eleanor felt the pull, the safety, the urge to lean into it. But she stopped herself. "Ben, I can't. I'm still married. It's complicated." "I can wait," he said, his voice even and sure. "However long it takes." "Why are you so good to me?" "Because," he said, watching the sparks rise into the night sky, "some people are worth waiting for." On Liam's first birthday, it seemed like the entire town came to the party at the community hall. Chloe took her first wobbly steps toward Liam. Sarah had baked a cake shaped like a mountain. The town doctor gave Liam a hand-knit sweater. Maya told a story she had made up, just for him. Ben was showing Liam how to stack wooden blocks. Even at 1-year-old, Sophia was more fascinated by the taste of the wooden blocks than building with them. Bella watched her with Liam, her heart swelling with a love so profound it felt tangible. That evening, as she gently rocked Sophia to sleep, she hummed a simple tune. "Mama," Sophia murmured, her very first word. Bella clutched her daughter close, silent tears of joy carving warm trails on her face. "Yes, my love. Mama's right here, always." She thought she had finally achieved it. A sense of belonging, a true home, a quiet life. She was convinced the past was a ghost, left nearly 3,000 miles behind her, buried beneath a new identity, and a life built on the simple honesty of kneading dough, not maintaining an image. But in Chicago, in a stark, minimalist office with a panoramic view of the city skyline, a cybersecurity analyst named Peterson was examining a flagged anomaly. An old shared cloud account, long dormant, had suddenly synced a new photo from an IP address in coastal Oregon. The photo showed a woman holding a toddler in front of a bakery. A facial recognition algorithm confirmed the unmistakable features of Isabella Vance. Peterson picked up a dedicated line. "Mr. Vance, I think we have her." Bella's carefully constructed, fragile world was about to shatter, because the past, it seems, is never really gone. It just waits for an opening. 2 years after Bella disappeared, Arthur Vance sat in his penthouse, surveying the wreckage of his own making. He hadn't had a drink in 18 months. He had installed a new president to manage Vance Holdings, distancing himself from the company's daily grind. He was, in his own words, auditing the structural failure of his marriage. He was finally facing the reasons a woman would abandon a life of unimaginable wealth just to escape him. The self-reflection was agonizing, forcing him to acknowledge his suffocating need for control, the way he used money as both a weapon and a shield, and the deep-seated neglect he had always passed off as ambition. He'd filled notebooks with letters he could never send to Bella, filled with apologies that felt empty, even to himself, and questions he knew he'd lost the right to ask. "I thought providing her with everything meant I was a good husband," Arthur admitted. "But I never offered her the one thing she truly needed. I never even bothered to find out what that was." "And what do you suppose she needed?" "To be cherished. To be his equal, not his acquisition." Arthur's voice was strained. "I treated her like the crown jewel of my real estate portfolio. Now she's vanished, and all I'm left with is this hollow apartment and the soul-crushing knowledge that I demolished the only real thing in my life. His phone vibrated in that exact moment. Peterson's name flashed on the screen. Arthur's pulse quickened as he accepted the call. Tell me, Seaside Grove, Oregon. She has a daughter, looks healthy, around 2 years old. Her name is Sophia. Arthur's meticulously rebuilt composure crumbled into dust. Are you certain? The birth record, sir. Her bakery's incorporation date is 9 months after she vanished. What's the strategy, Arthur? Catherine, his lead attorney, spoke in measured tones from the other side of his massive Chicago office. She mouthed the words, "Think this through." But Arthur Vance was beyond listening. That was his daughter. Somewhere on the Oregon coast was a little girl who had his eyes, a life from which he had been completely erased. Get her location, he snapped to his head of security on the phone. The bakery's address, the name she's using, who she's living with, all of it. Arthur, Catherine cut in, her voice sharp, we've been over this. Acting on impulse is the single worst thing you can do. You are not emotionally ready for this. But Arthur had already disconnected the call, bringing up private jet schedules to Portland on a large monitor. 2 years of court-mandated therapy, of carefully reconstructing his public persona. It was all disintegrating. That's my little girl. I've been absent for her entire life. I'm ready. He was not ready. 2 days later, Arthur sat in a polished black sedan across the street from a charming storefront named The Daily Rise. His security team had been ruthlessly efficient. Isabella was now Bella Rossi. She had a thriving business, a place in the community, a new existence, and a new man. Arthur watched as Bella came outside holding a small girl's hand, laughing at something a man in a flannel shirt was saying. The man had a kind, weathered face and an easygoing manner with her that made Arthur's hands clench the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. Then he saw the little girl's face, Bella's warm brown hair, but his own distinct, deep-set blue eyes. The child pointed a small finger at the man and squealed with delight, "Up, Papa Liam." Arthur's meticulously controlled world imploded. His daughter called another man Papa. They strolled toward the town's small park, and Arthur trailed them on foot, maintaining a cautious distance. He saw this stranger swing his daughter up onto his strong shoulders, saw Bella watch them with a genuine, light-hearted smile he hadn't seen in years. They appeared as a complete family, a picturesque, coastal family, the type he'd only ever scoffed at in magazines. That evening, in the cold opulence of his hotel room, Arthur demolished 2 years of sobriety with a $500 bottle of scotch and a call to his top litigator. Prepare the documents. I want sole custody, now. Arthur, we need to consider the public relations angle. A mother who leaves before a child is born has a very strong case in family court. It's not seen as parental kidnapping. I don't care what it's seen as. She is living under an assumed identity. She hid my legal heir from me. I have the money, the influence, the most ruthless lawyers in the nation. She sells bread out of a glorified storefront. Get me my daughter. The lawyer let out a heavy sigh. I'll begin the filings. But Arthur, I'm warning you. This type of aggressive scorched earth battle, it has a way of burning everyone involved. Just get it done. The next morning, Arthur walked into the bakery. An older woman with kind eyes and a flour-dusted apron looked up from behind the counter. Her smile was warm, but wary. Can I help you? I'm looking for Bella Rossi. The chill in Arthur's voice caused the woman's welcoming expression to fade immediately. And may I tell her who's asking? An old acquaintance. Bella emerged from the back, a little girl named Sophia clinging to her leg. And then she saw Arthur. The world seemed to grind to a halt. All the color drained from her face as she reflexively pulled Sophia into a tight, shielding embrace. "Mommy, who's that man?" Sophia's tiny voice registered the sudden frost in the air. "Helen, could you please take Sophia for a cookie? Right now." The woman, Helen, instantly recognized the threat radiating from Arthur. "Of course. Come on, sweet pea, let's go see if we can find one with extra sprinkles." Sophia began to object. "But I want Mommy." Helen was already guiding her toward the kitchen, leaving Bella and Arthur alone in the suddenly quiet shop. The air hummed with 8 years of shared life, 2 years of bitter separation, and the massive chasm that now lay between them. Arthur was the first to speak. "Hello, Isabella." "Don't," she whispered, her voice tight. "You don't get to use that name. What are you doing in my life, Arthur?" "I'm here to see my daughter, the one you concealed from me." Bella's eyes blazed with defiance. "I didn't conceal her. I protected her." "Protected her from what? A father who could have provided her with anything she could ever want?" Bella scoffed, a short, sharp sound of disbelief. "You wouldn't have provided for her. You would have scheduled her. A new asset for Vance Holdings. Did you even know I was carrying a daughter? Did you remember my due date? Did it matter to you at all?" "That's not reasonable." "Reasonable." Bella's voice shook with a rage she had suppressed for years. "You skipped our final ultrasound for a last-minute deal in Dubai. You were with your assistant while I was at home, dealing with morning sickness all by myself. Don't you dare stand there and lecture me about what is reasonable." Arthur slid his phone onto the counter, an official legal filing displayed on the screen. "This is a petition for custody. I am suing for full and exclusive parental rights." The floor felt like it had fallen away beneath Bella's feet. "You wouldn't dare." "I would, and I am. You've committed identity fraud. You have engaged in custodial interference. My legal retainer costs more per day than this entire town's quarterly tax revenue. What do you have? A baker and a borrowed name." Bella's hands trembled, but her voice was firm. "I have her. I have Sophia, and she has no idea who you are. She doesn't need you. She calls another man her father. My daughter calls another man her father because Liam has been present. Liam is the one who reads her bedtime stories. Liam is the one who kisses her scraped knees. Liam is her father in every single way that truly matters." Arthur's expression was a mask of cold fury. "Not according to the state of Illinois. Genetically, she is a Vance, and she is coming back to Chicago with me. Not while I'm breathing. I'll see you in court, Isabella." He pivoted and strode out, leaving Bella standing amidst the wreckage of the life she had so painstakingly created. Her strength gave out, her legs buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor, consumed by desperate sobs. Helen ran out from the back, rushing to her side. "What is it, dear? What happened?" "He's here," she cried. "He found us. He's going to take Sophia. He's going to take my baby." The legal summons arrived a few days later. It demanded sole physical and legal custody be awarded to Arthur Vance, the child's immediate relocation to Chicago, and specified that Bella Rosie would be granted, pending a court evaluation, supervised visits only. The petition listed parental alienation, fraud, and unlawful flight to avoid jurisdiction. A prominent financial news site broke the story first. Chicago real estate mogul Arthur Lexington locates runaway wife in Lakeside, Michigan. The article, strategically leaked by Arthur's team, portrayed Chloe as a deceptive gold digger. The story infected the small lakeside town's opinion of her overnight. She was lying to everyone. She wasn't even using her real name. At the local park, mothers would pull their kids away as Chloe and her son approached. The library where she worked got calls from patrons complaining. Her landlord handed her a 30-day eviction notice. Her new partner Sam and his family stood by her, but to the rest of the town, she was a pariah. Chloe started packing, preparing to flee once more. "And where will you go this time?" Sam asked softly. "Anywhere. Somewhere he won't find me." Sam held her shoulders, his grip steady. "His mistress found you in a coffee shop, Chloe. There's nowhere to hide. You can't run forever." "So, what am I supposed to do?" "You fight," Sam said, his voice firm. "You stand your ground right here, and you fight for your son." His cousin, a young lawyer named Maria, walked in, a battered briefcase in hand. "My family law practice just got its first pro bono case." Chloe stared at her, utterly confused. "What are you talking about?" "For 3 years, I've been handling small-town divorces and DUIs. My brother, my brother is a paralegal at one of the top firms in Chicago. He owes me a favor. Now unpack your things, and let's start building our case." In the following weeks, Maria and her brother became a relentless duo. They compiled evidence, interviewed witnesses, and pieced together a detailed account of Arthur's profound emotional neglect. The local doctor provided medical records confirming Chloe had attended every single prenatal appointment by herself. Sam and other townspeople offered to testify about her character and her complete devotion to her son. Gradually, as the real story started to emerge, the community began to see that Chloe wasn't a criminal on the run. She was a refugee who had escaped a prison of wealth and loneliness. The custody battle took place in the county courthouse. Arthur showed up with a legal team of 5, all dressed in custom-tailored suits. Chloe's entire legal representation was Maria, who looked on with a single, determined legal pad. Arthur's lead counsel delivered a brutal opening statement. "Your Honor, Arthur Lexington is a loving father who was denied the basic human right to know his own son. He is the victim of a manipulative and selfish act by a woman who ran away, assumed a false identity, and has spent the last 2 years poisoning his child against him. We are here to reclaim his paternal rights." The purpose of this hearing was to rectify a terrible wrong. Witnesses spoke of Arthur's changed demeanor. His therapist discussed his recent journey of self-discovery. A board member from his company praised his commitment to family values. A child development expert outlined the world-class education and advantages a child would have in Mr. Lexington's custody. The case against Chloe appeared damning. The separate bank account she had opened before leaving, the apartment she had rented under a different name, the birth certificate with the father's name left empty. A photograph of her, laughing with Sam, was shown as evidence that she had heartlessly moved on. As the second day concluded, Chloe turned to Maria and whispered, "We're going to lose him." Maria squeezed her hand reassuringly. "This is just day 2. Have faith in our plan." On the third day, Maria presented her own witnesses. Sam, the town physician, and the librarian Chloe worked for. Each of them offered a clear, unwavering image of Chloe as a dedicated and resilient mother who had created a loving, stable home with very little. Arthur's attorneys objected repeatedly, claiming it was all anecdotal testimony that didn't change the legal facts of her deception. Finally, Chloe was called to the stand. "Miss Sullivan," Maria started, purposefully using her maiden name, "why did you leave your husband?" Chloe looked straight at Arthur, her voice steady and clear. "Because in his world, I was becoming an accessory. I was an afterthought, and I couldn't let my son be born as an afterthought too." She went on to detail the slow, agonizing collapse of their marriage. The doctor's appointments he skipped for zoning meetings, the poorly concealed affair with the architect on his new skyscraper project, and the cold indifference of a man who had long ago ceased to view her as his partner. Maria produced Arthur's own travel itineraries as proof, showing he was on a business trip for 9 of Chloe's prenatal appointments. His phone records revealed only 4 text messages asking about the pregnancy in over 9 months. Credit card statements from 5-star hotels told the rest of the story. "I didn't leave to hurt him," Chloe stated, her voice filling the silent courtroom. "I left to save myself and to save my child from a life of crushing, emotional absence." Arthur's lawyer was merciless in his cross-examination, focusing on the lies, the assumed name, and the theft of a father-son bond. But Chloe remained composed. "I used my mother's name, and I supported myself with funds from a trust my grandfather established for me. I have never used a single dollar of his money since the day I left." That's an excuse, not a reason. I begged him to come to the sonograms, but a corporate merger was always more pressing. And Sam? Sam was there. He was there because my son needed a father figure. Leo calls him Dada, because Sam is there every morning and every night. That is what a father does. On the 5th day, Chloe's lawyer brought in a surprise witness. Marcus Thorne, Arthur Lexington's long-serving chief financial officer, walked into the courtroom, and all the color vanished from Arthur's face. "Mr. Thorne, what is your relationship to Arthur Lexington?" "He is the son of my dearest friend. I have known Arthur his entire life." Marcus went on to describe the all-consuming machine that was the Lexington Corporation, telling a story about how Arthur's own father suffered a stroke in his office and wouldn't leave for the hospital until the stock market closed. Arthur had missed his own wedding anniversary, countless birthdays, and even the last hours of his own mother's life, all for the sake of another acquisition. That emotional void was the secret to his business success. "When Arthur first told me about Leo," Marcus said, his voice thick with regret, "he didn't say, 'I am going to be a dad.' He said, 'I need you to open a new trust. We have a complication.'" That single sentence reveals everything about the man he had become. Arthur stared at the man who had been a second father to him, his expression a mixture of shock and betrayal. Marcus would not look at him. Suddenly, Arthur jumped to his feet. "Your Honor, I have something to say." His lawyer hissed, "Arthur, sit down now." But Arthur was finished with lawyers, with tactics, with the fight. He's right. Marcus is right about everything. He looked at Chloe as though truly seeing her for the first time since they had met. "I didn't lose a wife. I pushed her away. I didn't lose my son. I never earned the right to have him." His voice began to tremble. "You were right to run. I would have ruined him, just as I ruined what we had." The courtroom was enveloped in a heavy silence. In the back, Isabella Vance, the architect, watched in disbelief. She had attended to witness Chloe's humiliation, to see Arthur stake his claim on his heir. Instead, she was watching him surrender, admitting to everyone that his entire life had been a hollow victory. "I came here to take my son back to Chicago," he said, his voice barely audible. "But that is not what is best for him." Arthur spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor, I am retracting my petition for sole custody. I am not attempting to take Leo from his mother. I am hoping to earn the privilege of becoming his father, if she will allow it." He glanced at Chloe. "And if she won't, I will understand." The judge called for a recess. When she returned, her decision was firm and direct. Joint legal custody will be established. Primary physical custody is granted to Chloe Sullivan. Arthur Lexington will be granted graduated visitation rights, beginning with supervised visits and progressing to unsupervised weekends after 1 year of documented, consistent participation in family therapy and parenting courses. All child support will be managed through a trust for Leo's future education. She then fixed her gaze on Arthur. "Mr. Lexington, your son does not know you. Fatherhood is built with your time, not with your money. You have a chance to create a real relationship. Do not squander it. Chloe wept, tears of profound relief cascading down her cheeks. Arthur just nodded, accepting the judgment. The architect who had come to see Chloe's downfall slipped out of the courtroom, her own ambitions now in ruins. The war had ended. The quiet, arduous task of rebuilding was about to begin. The playroom at the community center had the faint scent of disinfectant and crayons. A social worker named Maria sat on a tiny plastic chair, scrolling on her phone. She was the court-appointed supervisor for Arthur Lexington's inaugural visit with his son. Chloe hovered by the door, a painful knot of anxiety in her stomach, unable to bear watching, but too worried to leave completely. Arthur showed up precisely on time, holding several large bags from a high-end toy store. There was a plush cashmere blanket, an imported wooden rocking horse, and a tablet loaded with learning games. Leo, who was now 2, saw the tall man in the expensive suit and immediately clung to Chloe's leg. "No," Leo said firmly. "My Dada." Chloe knelt to her son's eye level. "This is Arthur. He's your—" She struggled to find the right term. "He's your first dad." "I have Dada. Dada Sam." The words struck Arthur like a physical blow. With all his influence, all his wealth, his own son had just dismissed him with 3 simple words. Maria looked up from her screen. "Mr. Lexington, ditch the toys. Get on the floor." Arthur was completely bewildered. "And do what?" "Just be present. That's the work." So Arthur, in his $2,000 suit, sat down on the worn-out alphabet mat, surrounded by mismatched blocks and scuffed toy trucks, feeling utterly ridiculous. Leo paid him no mind, trying to jam a star-shaped block into a square hole. "That one looks tough," Arthur offered quietly. Miles eyed him with caution. "My guitar?" "Can I show you a chord?" Julian waited. "Okay." For the next 50 minutes, they sat on the floor, one set of large, scarred chef's hands guiding a tiny pair on the fretboard. Julian found himself humming an old folk tune and was shocked by the rust in his own voice. Miles let out a sudden giggle, a bright, clear note that felt like it mended a small tear in Julian's shredded soul. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Julian felt a sliver of warmth. When the hour was over, Miles gave a tiny wave, just a quick wiggle of his fingers, but it felt like a truce. "He laughed," Julian told Grace, his voice thick with emotion. "He actually laughed with me." Grace offered a knowing smile. "Because you were here. Keep being here." For the next 3 months, Julian was present every Tuesday and Thursday for 4 hours, supervised by Grace or another social worker. He learned how to sing nursery rhymes in goofy voices, how to construct magnificent block castles only to watch them get gleefully demolished, and how to accept that Miles was more captivated by the cardboard box than the $600 miniature drum kit it contained. He sold his Chicago penthouse and bought a simple 3-bedroom house in a suburb of Nashville, its walls soon becoming a gallery for Miles's crayon masterpieces. He ran his restaurant empire by phone and video call, and was stunned to realize he didn't miss the fire of the kitchen at all. He never missed a therapy session, learning how to listen instead of giving orders. He joined a local parenting group where he was the oldest dad by 2 decades and the only one who arrived with a private driver. "Why are you even here?" a young mother asked him once. "You could hire a team of nannies." "Because I have to learn how to do this myself," he replied, the honesty raw in his throat. "You can't outsource being a father." By the 6th month, he had earned unsupervised day visits. He would drive into Nashville to pick Miles up from the small apartment Ava rented above a vintage instrument shop. They'd go to the park by the Cumberland River or get ice cream, and sometimes they'd just stay home and experiment with new pancake recipes. Your pancakes aren't as spicy anymore, Chef Julian, Miles announced one Saturday. Chef Julian. It wasn't Dad, not yet, but it was a title, a name he was slowly earning. Julian wept in his car on the drive back to his quiet house before calling his therapist. He called me Chef Julian. How did that make you feel? Like I was finally handed the recipe to a dish I thought I'd never taste, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to perfect it. Ava watched his transformation from a careful distance. It would have been simpler to cling to her fury, but she couldn't ignore the steady, authentic change. He came to Miles's toddler music classes and sat on a tiny chair next to Ben, the two men who loved her son, forging a quiet, respectful truce. He's not the man he was, Ben observed one afternoon as they watched Julian patiently show Miles how to hold a guitar pick. People can change, Ava said, if they want it badly enough. Does that make up for what he did to you? No, but it changes what happens from now on. Ben took her hand. Ava, we've been taking this slow for 3 years. I love you, and I love that little boy as if he were my own. I want to be your husband and his father, but I have to know if you're ready to move forward. Ava looked at the kind, steady man. He had shown up in the middle of an ice storm with a generator, built the soundproofing for her home studio with his own hands, and had been her steadfast support every single day without asking for anything in return. Yes, she whispered, I'm ready. 3 years after the divorce was finalized, Ava and Ben were married on a hill overlooking the rolling Tennessee landscape. Miles, clutching the rings in a small wooden box, served as the best man. A small group of close friends were there, and Julian sat in a chair next to his partner, Sarah, a warm-hearted, organic farmer he'd met at the local market. He watched them say their vows with an unforced smile. At the laid-back reception at a nearby cidery, Julian found Ava. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For not barring the door, for giving me a chance to earn my place in his life. Ava smiled. You did the earning, Julian. You just kept showing up. That's all it ever really takes. Miles ran over, grabbing a hand from each of them. Dads, come dance. 2 dads, both present, both earned, both loved. Ava thought of the woman she had been, pregnant and hiding in a motel room, terrified of what lay ahead. She thought of giving birth in a new city, supported by a man who became her family. She thought of the long journey from Ava Croft to Ava Reese, from being a famous chef's wife to being her own person, from a gilded cage overlooking Lake Michigan to a messy, wonderful, real freedom in the heart of Music City. She had found it. Not a perfect life, not a simple one, but an authentic one. And an authentic life, she now knew, was priceless. 3 years after the divorce, Simone Dubois stood across the street from Ava's recording studio, second verse, trying to muster a sliver of the cutting confidence she once wielded. She wore a simple coat from a department store, a universe away from the designer pieces of her past. Her hair, once a beacon of expensive salon work, was now its natural shade, streaked with gray. Her nails, once flawless, were bitten and short. Her world detonated the day Julian Croft, the culinary giant, called his publisher and had her blacklisted. In the gossipy world of food journalism, the news spread like wildfire. The critic who tried to trade reviews for a ring, who used an affair as a weapon, who interfered in a high-profile marriage. She was toxic. She attempted to sue Julian for career damages, but her attorney just shook his head. On what grounds? He cut ties with you over a massive ethical breach. You have no case. Her savings were incinerated by legal fees. She lost her downtown condo, sold her prized wine collection for pennies on the dollar, and finally had to move back to her parents' home in a Maryland suburb she'd spent 20 years clawing her way out of. She took a job writing bland marketing copy for a national restaurant chain, describing cheeseburgers with a hollow smile. The woman who was almost the next Mrs. Croft was now paid by the word to praise onion rings. But that morning, she saw Ava's face in a music magazine. Nashville songwriter Ava Reese wins prestigious Americana Award. Ava looked poised, brilliant, and whole. She was everything Simone had once been and had personally set on fire. Ava walked out of her studio, holding the hand of her son, Miles, now 5 years old, who was chattering about a field trip to a local farm. She stopped dead when she saw Simone. Miles, honey, go inside with Ben. Mommy will be right there. The boy ran in, and Ava crossed her arms, her face a mask of neutrality as she faced the woman who had tried to shatter her world. Ava, please, just 5 minutes. Ava's expression was unyielding. You have two. Simone's story spilled out in a desperate, broken torrent. The blacklisting, the professional exile, the humiliating collapse. I lost everything, and you want me to feel sorry for you? No. I want you to understand. We both wanted the same thing. Ava let out a short, bitter laugh. We wanted absolutely nothing of the kind. We both wanted to be somebody, Simone insisted, to be more than just girls from the suburbs. You chose the hard road the right way. I took a shortcut. You chose to methodically dismantle another woman's life to take what you wanted. That's not a shortcut, Simone. That's a demolition. Simone's eyes welled with tears. I know. I see that now. And I am so sorry for everything. The silence felt heavy in the Tennessee heat. Ava remembered finding the hidden file on Julian's laptop, the architectural plans for the penthouse labeled Phase 2, with a soundproofed recording studio replacing the nursery. So why are you in Nashville? I saw you in that magazine. You're thriving. You have this life you built yourself, with your own talent. I just wanted you to know that I finally get it. What you did took more courage than any takedown I ever wrote. Ava regarded this ghost of a woman, a pale imitation of the rival she once faced. There's a foundation a few blocks away. They provide music education for underprivileged kids. They need someone to run their fundraising and public relations. Pro bono. Simone stared at her. What? It's volunteer work. But if you build something real for them, I'll give you a glowing recommendation. Why would you ever help me? Because someone helped me when I was at rock bottom. And because you're not too old to write a new song for yourself, if you really mean it. Simone's tears finally fell. I don't deserve that. No, Ava agreed. You don't. But do it anyway. Not for me. For the next kid who feels lost. Help them build something beautiful instead of trying to tear it down. Ava walked away, leaving Simone holding a brochure for the Notes of Hope Foundation. 2 weeks later, Simone stood in a cramped office with a strategic plan she had written on a public library computer. The director read it over. Ms. Dubois, this is brilliant. It's strategic, professional, exactly what we've been missing. Thank you. I want this to be a place where kids can find their voice and their future. Ava Reese sent you to us. She said you were a project worth investing in. Simone's throat closed up. She was far more generous than I had any right to expect. Then earn that generosity. Simone looked down at the plans, at the framework for Notes of Hope. A place to start again. Okay, she whispered. I will earn it. At the community potluck that weekend, the sprawling chosen family was all there. Ben's bandmates and their partners, Ava's songwriter friends, the families of Miles's classmates. Julian and Sarah were there too, laughing by the grill. It was a new kind of harmony, one they had all composed together. Ava watched them all from a checkered picnic blanket. Her true foundation, her real home. Liam settled onto the grass beside her. You happy? Yeah, she breathed. I really am. 5 years ago, you were sleeping on my spare mattress with archive dust in your hair. It feels like it happened to someone else. That's because you're a completely different architectural historian. Ava shook her head. No, I'm the same person I was all along. I just finally found the right structure to restore. Richard approached, Finn running ahead to show Ava a four-leaf clover. After Finn ran back to Sam, Richard lingered. He's an incredible boy, he said. He is. You did that. You're raising him to be curious and kind and fearless. We're all doing it together, Ava replied softly. All of us. Can I ask you something? Richard waited for her nod. Do you ever regret it? Leaving everything behind? Ava looked at Finn laughing with Sam, at Liam chatting with his husband, at Daniel sketching in a notebook, at this life she had restored from the studs up, built on trust and community, not for a single moment. I regret that it had to happen, but I will never regret the choice I made. I do, Richard said quietly. I regret every single thing I did that made you believe you had no other option. I know, but you're different now too, and that has to count for something. Finn called out, Mama! Dad! Liam! Come see! They walked over together to their messy, beautiful, wonderful family. Two fathers for Finn, both of whom had earned the title through their love and actions. A mother who had rescued herself and her son, and a village that had chosen to become a family. The sun dipped below the green mountains, painting the Vermont sky in shades of peach and lavender. Ava felt a profound sense of peace she had never experienced in the Boston penthouse with its sweeping city views. This was real, imperfect, and tangible, a life she had reclaimed. Daniel caught her eye from across the green and raised his glass of iced tea in a silent toast. To women who restore their own damn histories. To communities that show up. To second chances that are built, not just given. Ava raised her own glass in return. To courage. To choosing truth over comfort. To walking away when it's the only path that leads you back to yourself. The chirping of crickets filled the evening air, Finn's laughter echoing in the warm twilight, and Ava Hayes, formerly Mrs. Richard Sterling, finally knew she was home. The next morning, Ava stood in her sun-drenched office, carefully turning the page of a brittle 19th century folio. The early light streamed through the large windows overlooking the main street of Woodstock, the same street she'd once walked down, feeling utterly terrified. She had come so far. Her project board was full: 3 historic home consultations, 2 commercial preservation grants, and 1 woman who needed help leaving a gilded cage. This was the work she was always meant to do, the woman she was always meant to be. The bell on the front door chimed. A woman entered, maybe 30, with a fading bruise on her cheek she tried to conceal with her hair, and a little girl on her hip. Ava recognized that look, the fear mixed with fierce resolve, the way she held her child like a shield, the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from living in a state of constant alert. Can I help you? Ava asked gently. The woman's voice was barely a whisper. I need to vanish. I need a new history, but I have no idea where to even begin. Ava walked to a bookshelf behind her desk and took down a small, framed piece of paper. Her own simple list from 5 years ago, the one she'd scribbled on the back of a museum brochure before leaving Richard's penthouse. Prepaid debit card, go bag, bus ticket, burner phone, new email. She showed it to the woman. This was my first draft 5 years ago. It held up. The woman stared at the list, then at the bright, successful consultancy around her, at the life Ava had rebuilt. You actually did it. Ava gestured to everything, her business license on the wall, photos of Finn on her desk. the life she'd reclaimed with her own two hands. I'm here, aren't I? Can you help me? That's precisely why I'm here. Ava pulled out a fresh sheet of archival paper, the same kind she'd used to map her own new life. Let's start with your foundation. First, what's your name? Sophie. Sophie Miller. Ava began to outline a plan, years of professional expertise and personal history merging into a roadmap to freedom. Okay, Sophie, let's restore your life. For the next 2 hours, Ava walked Sophie through every single detail. Secure messaging apps, cash-based jobs that wouldn't create a digital trail, community networks for safe housing, and the documents needed for a fresh start. Small towns with robust support systems, resources, and hidden opportunities. The first 24 hours are the hardest part of any restoration, Ava said. You'll question yourself 1,000 times. But remember, you're not demolishing your life. You're preserving what matters. You're building towards safety, towards who you were always meant to be. Sophie held her daughter tighter. What if he finds me? Then you'll have a whole preservation society to protect you. That's how this works. You draw up the plans, but you quickly find out you're not doing the work alone. Ava handed her a folder. This has everything you need: numbers for hotlines, shelters in 3 different states, job resources, and my personal cell phone number. You can call me anytime you need to, day or night. What do I owe you for all this? Nothing. Someone handed me the tools to start over for free. Now I'm paying it forward. After Sophie left, Ava sat at her large oak table for a long moment, feeling the echo of the past. 5 years ago, she had been the one on the other side of a desk, desperate for an escape route. Now, she was the one providing the map. The circle was closing. Liam appeared in the doorway with a mug of tea. Another one? Yes. She reminds me of me. Scared, but ready. You're doing good work, Ava. I'm doing the work I was always supposed to do. That evening, Ava went to Finn's school art fair. The town green was buzzing with their found family. Liam and Sam, Chloe and her wife with little Noah, Daniel with his ever-present lump of clay, and Richard with his new partner, Eleanor, both cheering when Finn's model of the covered bridge wobbled and collapsed. Everyone applauded anyway, including Finn, who thought the disaster was hysterical. Ava's heart felt full, watching her son enjoy a childhood so different from the one Richard would have orchestrated in Boston. Here, Finn was allowed to be imperfect, to try and fail, to just be a kid. After the festival, they all went for maple creamies. Finn sat between his 2 fathers, sizing up his chances for a second cone. Papa Liam, can we get another one? Liam chuckled. Ask your mom. Mama says one is plenty, Ava said with a grin. Finn pivoted to Richard with wide, hopeful eyes. Dad, can you say yes? Richard glanced at Ava, and they shared a brief united front. Nice try, buddy. 1 cone. Finn heaved a dramatic sigh, totally worth a shot. Later, as they walked to their cars, Richard fell into step beside Ava. Thank you, he said, his voice low. You thank me every time you visit. You can stop. I'm not thanking you for your pity, he clarified. I'm thanking you for showing me what a real foundation looks like. Ava paused. What do you mean? This. Richard gestured to the group ahead, Finn and Noah chasing each other across the grass, Liam and Eleanor talking easily, Sam and Daniel playfully arguing about joinery techniques. You built this. A structure of people who support each other. I grew up with business contacts and strategic partnerships. You showed me what a real community is. It took me a while to find the right materials myself, but you did. And you didn't just save yourself and Finn, you saved me. By leaving, you forced me to look at the man I was. I don't think I ever properly thanked you for that. You've thanked me by becoming a man Finn can admire. That's more than enough. That night, tucking Finn into bed in their cozy apartment above the bookstore, with its well-worn furniture and the scent of old paper, Ava felt a sense of wealth that money could never build. Finn was safe, cared for, and cherished. The bills were handled. Tomorrow, she'd help another woman draw up her own escape plan. Sam would fix the creaky floorboard in the hall. They'd have dinner with friends. It was simple and solid, and it was everything. Mama, Finn said sleepily, tell me the story again. Which story, sweetheart? About when you were an architect. Ava smiled, stroking his hair. Once upon a time, there was a woman who forgot her own blueprints. She lived in a polished glass skyscraper in a big city, but her own life felt empty. Then she discovered a new life was being built inside her, and she knew she needed a stronger foundation. So one morning, before the city woke up, she walked away from the skyscraper and drove north to find a place where they could both be truly whole. And she found Woodstock, Finn finished, having learned the story by heart. She found Woodstock and Aunt Chloe and Uncle Sam and Papa Liam. And later, Dad Richard found them too, and learned how to build better things in his own way. I'm glad you had a good blueprint, Mommy. Me too, my love. Me too. After Finn fell asleep, Ava stood at the window. She looked out at the historic street, the sturdy brick buildings, the quiet Vermont town that had become her refuge. Her phone buzzed with a message from Sophie. I did it. I submitted my resignation. I'm terrified, but I'm free. Thank you, Ava typed back. You are going to build something incredible. And when you're ready, you'll help the next woman who needs a hand. That's how we build our network. That's how we win. She thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago, Ava Sterling, the quiet architectural historian behind a development titan, living in a gilded cage and slowly being erased from her own life's design. She had believed that leaving was a sign of professional failure. Now she knew it was the bravest restoration project she had ever undertaken. Leaving isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's the only way to find the original recipe. Ilara had walked away from the venture capital funds, from the tech world prestige, from the life everyone in Chicago society insisted she should crave. In doing so, she'd found all the essential ingredients: a mission, a community, a love not measured in stock options, and a life crafted to her own taste, under her own name. The past couldn't be unwritten. Julian would always be the man who coded a secret life for another woman. But the future was her menu to create, and she was drafting it one day, one client, one woman at a time. She was teaching them what she had learned during the darkest moments of that drive along Lake Michigan. You are far more resourceful than you imagine. You deserve to write your own recipes. You deserve to take up space in your own kitchen. And if you have to burn down your old world to find yourself, then strike a match. Run toward what is real. Run toward yourself. And on the other side, a community will be waiting, a vineyard owner with a cottage to spare, a friend who recognizes your true value, a man who appears with a hot stew on a frigid night, a town that offers support without asking for your history. You don't have to be Mrs. Davenport to be whole. You just have to be you. Ilara Vance, once Ilara Davenport, turned from the window and headed to bed. Tomorrow, she would help a local historical society plan a heritage food festival. Tonight, she would sleep soundly in a home that was entirely hers, in a life she had cooked up from scratch, with a son who was thriving. The pregnant wife had disappeared, but the woman she'd become, she was just beginning her second course. 5 years to the day after Ilara Davenport vanished from Chicago, Ilara Vance sat in a Saugatuck park, watching her son Leo build a drip castle with his friend Alex. The lake mist was burning off. promising the kind of Michigan day that inspired people to start over. Beatrice settled onto the bench next to her, still sharp at 78, her fingers deftly knitting a small hat, thinking deep thoughts, thinking about anniversaries. 5 years today. Any second thoughts? Alara watched Leo giggle as a bigger kid's splash wrecked his castle. He immediately began scooping wet sand to rebuild. Cheerful and undeterred. Not a single one. Good. Because that chef you mentored last year, Simone, she phoned me yesterday. She made it to New Orleans. She's safe. She asked me to tell you, thank you. Alara smiled. Tell her to call me in a year. And tell me her little bistro is flourishing. That's the only thanks I need. Over the past 5 years, Alara had guided 27 women in starting their own ventures. 27 women who had arrived at her consultancy feeling like a failed recipe and left with a solid business plan, with renewed confidence, with the assurance that someone understood. She maintained a secure digital file with only their first names and the dates they started over, a testament to their bravery, their resilience, and the quiet network for women escaping gilded cages. Some checked in to thank her. Some she never heard from again, and that was perfect. That was the goal. They had become someone else, somewhere else, just as she had. Her culinary history practice had boomed. She'd brought on 2 partners, both women, with their own tales of leaving the corporate ladder behind. Miles managed their supplier relationships, his decades of agricultural experience perfect for their 47 active heritage food projects. They specialized in menu reconstruction, grant applications for culinary nonprofits, and what they secretly called personal reinventions. Julian called it Alara's Defiance. She called it giving back. Miles walked across the park from his winery, now a celebrated vintner. Alex trailed behind, 11 years old and already a gifted artist. They had been married for 2 years, a quiet ceremony in the autumn vineyards with Leo as the ring bearer. And most of the town celebrating with them. Dinner is served, Miles said, placing a kiss on Alara's hair. Your mother called. She's visiting next month. Helen, now 63 and retired from her university history post, came twice a year. She and Beatrice had become close friends, 2 women who had remade their lives in different decades, connected by a shared spirit. Did she mention for how long? 2 weeks. She wants to be here for Leo's birthday. Leo, overhearing this, ran over, covered in sand and joy. Grandma Helen is coming? Can she tell me more stories about when Mommy used to make potions in the kitchen? Alara laughed. I'm sure she will tell you every single messy story she remembers. They walked back to the house, this amazing, blended family they had built. Unconventional, unpredictable, but theirs. Authentic and chaotic, and filled with love. That afternoon, Julian arrived for his weekend with Leo. He had relocated to Michigan permanently, having sold his Chicago penthouse. Camilla was long gone, and he was with someone else. They were expecting a child in 3 months. They had asked Alara and Miles to be the baby's godparents, a gesture that had brought Alara to tears. Ready, buddy? Julian asked Leo. Can I bring my recipe book, Dad? I want to show you the new sauce I invented. Julian shot a look at Alara, who gave a nod of encouragement. Of course. Just text me when you get to my house. Thank you, Leo said with great formality, practicing his manners. Alara watched them drive off, her son confident in the love of many adults, understanding that family wasn't defined by bloodlines, that he was cherished and safe. You doing okay? Miles asked, wrapping an arm around her waist. Alara let out a long breath. Yeah, just thinking about how different the recipe of my life is now. Different good or different bad. Different extraordinary. That evening, Alara gave a guest lecture, at a local culinary school's food entrepreneurship program, offering free business planning for women leaving abusive situations. The Hearth Initiative had been operating for a year. It was a beautiful space, smelling of baking bread and spices with large communal tables that encouraged teamwork. Chloe was there tonight, the initiative's primary benefactor, watching the class she helped create. She and Clara would never be friends, but they had forged a careful truce. Chloe was making her reparations, rebuilding her own character, one grant at a time. Thank you all for coming, Clara began, speaking to the 24 women gathered in the main studio of the kiln. 5 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you are, scared, disoriented, and sure I was about to shatter my entire life. She shared a simplified version of her story, leaving out the details that would identify her as the wife of a famous gallery owner, offering just the essential structure. A marriage that looked like a perfect exhibition, but was actually a cage. A pregnancy that became a timer for her escape, and a flight that led to a complete rebirth. I won't lie and say it was simple. Those first few months in Asheville were the most difficult I have ever endured. My savings evaporated. I cried myself to sleep every night. I second-guessed every move, Clara admitted, but I kept creating. I made tiny clay animals in my rented room, and I found people who lifted me up. A cafe owner with an apartment upstairs, a retired potter who became my guide, a mountain community that chose to embrace me. One woman timidly raised a hand. How did you know you were making the right choice? I didn't, not for a very long time, but then my daughter was born, and I held her and knew I would rather be an independent potter covered in clay than a silent partner in a cold, white gallery. I would rather struggle to shape something with my own 2 hands than be comfortable and invisible. What if he finds you? Another woman asked, her voice shaking. Then you have a support system that will stand with you. You have legal aid. You have a whole community of women who have walked this road and reached the other side. You are not on your own. That is the single most important thing I learned. You are not on your own. After the talk, women surrounded her with questions, with quiet words of thanks, with pieces of their own histories. Clara listened to each one, giving advice, connecting them with services, and sharing her own story of hope. She remembered vividly being on the other side, the terrified woman asking if it was really possible to get away. Now, she was the living proof. Yes, leaving is possible. A new life is possible. You are possible. At 11 p.m., Clara drove home along the winding mountain road, the Blue Ridge peaks invisible but enormous, a vast, silent presence in the darkness. She considered all the versions of herself she had been. The passionate artist who believed in making beautiful things, the young wife who thought her partnership was a collaboration, the ghost of a modernist house whose own unique style was being slowly curated out of existence. The woman huddling in a cold studio, frightened but resolute, the mother who gave birth during an ice storm, the artisan who rebuilt her own life from earth and water and fire. All of those women were still part of her, the fragile ones and the strong ones, the broken shards and the final, resilient vessel. She was a tapestry of resilience, a collection of hard-earned lessons, a monument to the power of breaking away and creating something new. At home, her husband Sam was awake, composing a melody on his guitar. He looked up when she entered. How did it go? It was good, hard, but good. You're changing the world, Clara. I'm just showing them the clay is already in their hands. They're the ones doing all the shaping. Sam drew her into a hug. You are truly magnificent, Clara Finch. She smiled, hearing her name. Clara Finch. Not the wife of a gallerist, not Mrs. Anyone. Just herself, reclaimed and remolded and free. I'm just a woman who left a bad place. Yes, Sam said softly. And that is the most magnificent thing in the world. I believe you, ein. There is. That night, Alara dreamt of a spacecraft moving silently through the Kuiper belt as distant stars ignited, of the Earth shrinking to a pale blue dot in her vessel's wake, of a woman becoming a whisper of stardust, then coalescing into a brilliant new sun. She dreamt of nebulae smelling of ozone, of hand-carved wooden rockets for a nursery, and a future built on empirical truth. She dreamt of all the forgotten female astronomers she had championed, their names finally written in the sky, finding, discovering, proving, and finally being recognized. And she dreamt of a formula she had etched onto a discarded telescope lens, a hidden equation. I am gone. The initial hypothesis was flawed. The most powerful proof she had ever derived. The numbers that set her free. That morning, 7 months pregnant, Eris felt a swift kick from within. At 34, she was a leader in astrophysics. Hey you, settle down in there, she murmured, her hand on her belly. Her husband, Julian, a tech mogul, brought her coffee. Heard you had a breakthrough, he said, kissing her forehead, his voice the smooth, reassuring hum of a well-oiled machine. The aperture algorithm is crunching the data now. Should have your nebula mapped by noon. They stood by the window overlooking Denver, the perfect image of a power couple. It was a life built on intellect and ambition. After Julian left for his downtown office, Aris drove to the mountain observatory, taking the same winding road she had first taken years earlier when she was a graduate student, full of dreams, with a universe to discover. Now she was a celebrated scientist, a wife, and soon a mother who would give her child the stars. At the observatory, she pulled up the primary imaging screen. An encrypted program began to run. A simple progress bar read, Mapping Sector Gamma 9. Data synced. Today the universe was supposed to reveal a secret. The algorithm, a gift from Julian to expedite her research, rendered the nebula in breathtaking detail. But then anomalies appeared. Not cosmic rays, but flight manifests. Not pulsar signals, but hotel receipts from Seattle. A recurring signature, a woman named Chloe, a data scientist at Julian's firm, had found Eris's contact through an old university alumni page and had sent an anonymous, encrypted data packet with a single question. Are you sure you know who you're married to? Eris looked at the star chart, now overlaid with a constellation of lies, and knew exactly what she had to find. Yes, the truth is discoverable. Freedom is discoverable. You are discoverable. And if you have to burn your old universe down to find a new one in the void, then you light the fusion core. I will show you how. The final data point resolved on her screen. It was a video file, Chloe looking directly into her laptop camera, her expression a mix of fear and fierce resolve. Eris clicked play. He's not who you think he is, Chloe began. It's not just me. He's using his company to ruin people. 2 years later, a newly opened planetarium in Portland had never been so full. They had added seats in the walkways, every spot was taken, and a crowd stood near the exits. The New York Times had sent a science correspondent, and even a Nobel laureate was there, sitting in the front row. Eris walked to the podium. 7 months pregnant with her first child, her hands rested on her stomach as Aris faced the crowd. Her new partner, a quiet architect named Ben, sat in the front row with her younger brother, Leo, who was now 28, and her mentor from grad school, Maya, who was 63. Her ex-husband, Julian, and his lawyer were not there. They were busy with federal indictments. Her old colleague, Evelyn, and her research partner, Marcus, sat beside her family like proud sentinels. Eris had even flown her mother in from Miami, who was watching with tears in her eyes. The banner behind Eris announced, "The Lyra Project Grand Opening, charting an ethical future in data. Thank you all for being here, Eris began. 9 years ago, I arrived in Denver with a scholarship and a suitcase full of textbooks. I was sleeping in a dorm room. I had no idea if I would solve the equations I'd set for myself, if I would ever get tenure, or if I had just chosen a field with no room for me. She paused, her eyes scanning the packed auditorium. She spotted young women she had mentored, dotted through the audience. There was Anya from 3 years ago, now a leading researcher at Caltech, who had flown in that morning to be there. There were others she didn't know by name, but who knew her story. Women who had heard about the astrophysicist in Denver, whose own husband's technology revealed his crimes. I'm standing here tonight because people helped me. Maya gave me a research grant. Marcus gave me a chance. Ben gave me a blueprint for a new life. This city gave me a new sky to explore, and I want to spend the rest of my life paying that truth forward. The Lyra Project planned to do more than just map stars. A portion of all its funding would go toward pro bono legal help for scientists fighting to protect their intellectual property. It would also fund scholarships to help young women enter STEM fields. It would provide mentorship, ethics training, and mental health resources. Everything Eris had wished for. Everything she had been forced to learn on her own. We are naming our very first grant after someone who taught me a very painful lesson, Aris went on, that people who appear to have everything can still be morally bankrupt, that a confession is not the same as accountability, that sometimes the people who try to own your world, can become the very reason you discover a new one, but only if you refuse to accept their version of reality. She glanced at a photo on the screen behind her, not of Julian, but of the woman who had sent her the data packet. He had not known she would be part of the presentation. The Chloe Vance grant will fund digital security education and whistleblower protection for women in the tech industry, because I have learned that compromised people compromise others, and free people free other people. Chloe's eyes were shining with tears from the third row. She mouthed the words, "Thank you," from across the room. After the speeches, after the sparkling cider, and the endless stream of congratulations, Eris found herself alone on the planetarium's rooftop observatory, gazing out at the Portland skyline. The city lights were just starting to glitter against the dark. Ben appeared beside her. They hadn't spoken about Julian in almost a year, though Eris had been following the legal proceedings closely. Ben looked steady, solid, and real. "I heard about the grant," Ben said. "That was a class act." "It wasn't about class. It was about accuracy. Julian isn't the monster in my story. He was just a brilliant man who believed that owning data meant he owned the truth. The real monster was the system that rewarded his hubris, and the one that taught me my own worth was tied to his name. We're trying to fix that system." "I enabled that system," Julian confessed, his voice hollow over the phone. "I saw you as a brilliant accessory, not as a scientist about to have my child. I've said this to my lawyers, I know, but I feel compelled to say it to you again. I am so profoundly sorry." Eris watched the city lights, processing the change. "Are you telling the truth now?" Julian was quiet for a moment. "I don't have a company with my name on it. I'm not keynoting any tech conferences, but I'm testifying about the loopholes that allowed me to do what I did. I helped the SEC draft a new data privacy rule last year. So, yes, I believe I am. For the very first time, I truly believe I am." "Good," Eris said. "That's all the universe ever asks of anyone." They stood in a moment of quiet, static-filled understanding, the continent sprawling between them. "Can I ask a question?" Julian ventured. "Do you ever miss it? The penthouse overlooking the Rockies, the private jets, any of it?" Eris chuckled softly. "Not for a single second. I miss the woman I was before I became Mrs. Thorne. the driven young student who saw patterns in the cosmos nobody else could. And she's finally back. But she's stronger now. She has a daughter on the way, and a partner who loves to hear about gravitational waves. She has colleagues who champion her. She has work that reveals the truth. That woman has no need for a penthouse. From her new, small house, a voice called out, "Eris, Ben says the crib assembly instructions look like ancient hieroglyphics." Eris smiled. "I should go. My partner has a deep and abiding fear of Allen keys." "Aris," Julian said, stopping her. "Thank you. For proving there was a way to build something real, instead of just being the first to market." "You're the one who has to do the work," Aris replied. "I just showed you the data was corrupted." 3 months later, Eris gave birth to her daughter on a clear autumn morning. In stark contrast to the turbulent discovery that preceded her, Lyra Jane Thorne was born in calm, surrounded by affection in a hospital room with a view of Mount Hood. Ben held his daughter for the first time, tears openly tracing paths down his cheeks. Leo, brought in to meet his little niece, was uncharacteristically solemn, touching her impossibly small fingers with reverence. "She's so tiny," he breathed. "You were that tiny once too," Eris told him, her own voice thick with unshed tears. "Did you love me this much back then?" "Even more," she whispered back. "I loved you so much I charted a whole new galaxy to keep you safe." Leo mulled that over, because love is about discovery. "Yes, my sweet brother. Love is about discovery." Chloe visited the next day, bringing not flowers, but a small, beautifully framed photo of the Horsehead Nebula. "I wanted her to have her first glimpse of home," she said quietly. Ben helped me pick the frame. Eris was momentarily speechless. "It's perfect." Chloe sat carefully in the chair next to her bed. "I never had this with him. A chance to be honest, to see who someone really was right from the start. I was absent for all of it. I'm sure that's something you regret." "Don't apologize," he stated, his voice unwavering. "That was a consequence I fully earned. But I am endlessly thankful that you've let me back into his world." He looked down at the slumbering Lily. "She has your smile. She has your mentor's first name," Chloe replied quietly. Marcus's eyes shot up, his face a mask of disbelief. "Lillian supported me when everything was falling apart. She revealed the truth about your deals, knowing it could mean losing you forever. That took incredible strength. Our daughter deserved a name that embodied that kind of courage." "Thank you," Marcus whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "For everything. For leaving me. For standing up to me. For making me confront the man I had become." "You did the hardest thing," she said. "You chose to really see yourself. Most people never bother." Later, after Marcus had gone and their friend Ben had taken Leo home for the night, Chloe sat with her daughter in the quiet room. She recalled the woman she was 8 years ago, pregnant and terrified, discovering a hidden ledger of kickbacks on a tablet in their stark, minimalist Chicago penthouse. That woman couldn't have imagined this. A second child, born into a world of truth, a partner who saw her as a true equal, a son who was thriving, a career that gave her purpose, a community that had her back. Your brother was born in the middle of a skyscraper of lies, Chloe murmured to the sleeping baby. You were born into a garden of peace. That's the change 8 years can bring. That's what happens when you find the courage to redraw your own blueprints. 5 years later, Leo was 13, Lily was 5, and Chloe was 43 when the editor from a top architectural journal reached out. She wanted to do a feature on innovators who challenged the giants of the real estate world, telling the story of the architect who outplayed a development mogul to protect her community project and her child. Chloe's story, reframed for a new audience, would be the main feature. "I have to think about it," Chloe told her. That night she phoned Marcus. They operated like this now, two seasoned generals coordinating Leo's coding camp and Lily's upcoming dance recital, with the practiced ease of modern co-parenting. A major journal wants to do a big story, she informed him, about women who escape, about what happened. What are your thoughts? I think it could inspire a lot of people, but I'm also afraid it could paint a target on your back again, on all of us. Are they planning to use your old name? Architect Chloe Thorne? Chloe was quiet for a long moment. I haven't been Chloe Thorne in 13 years. I barely remember how she felt. She felt brilliant, Marcus said softly, and caged. Always so caged. Even when she was winning awards. Architect Chloe Hayes doesn't feel caged. No, he agreed. She feels free. Chloe agreed to the article, but only if she could control the narrative and guarantee her family's privacy. The editor consented. They worked together for 6 months, chronicling Chloe's work at her sustainable design firm, interviewing architects she had mentored, and showcasing the network of ethical builders and legal experts she had built. The article, titled "The Architect Who Redesigned Her Life," was an instant sensation. It won a prestigious design award and launched a national conversation about corporate corruption in construction, the personal toll of speaking out, and how financial control could be wielded as a weapon in relationships. Chloe watched the online discussion unfold from the couch of their cozy Evanston home, her family around her. When the initial buzz died down, Leo, now 15, glanced over at her. "You're so brave, Mom." "I was so scared," Chloe corrected him gently. "But I did what had to be done. That's what bravery is. Being terrified out of your mind and taking the next step anyway." Lily, now 7 and full of fire, announced, "When I grow up, I'm going to be an architect and a truth teller, just like you." Chloe pulled her daughter into a tight hug. "You can be anything in the entire world you want to be. That's the whole point. The design is yours." A decade after the scandal, the story of Chloe Thorne's escape had become a legend in architecture circles. The gifted designer who disappeared with her son, the real estate magnate who suffered a spectacular fall and reinvented himself as a champion for ethical development. The corporate lawyer who risked her career to expose the fraud. The truth was calmer and more profound than any of the gossip. Architect Chloe Hayes, age 45, helmed one of the most admired sustainable design firms in the country. Her foundation had provided legal and financial backing to over 400 professionals in the building industry. The film rights to her story had been optioned. Marcus Thorne, age 51, had established a foundation that funded transparent, community-led urban renewal projects. He split his time between Chicago and New York, overseeing his new work but no longer driven by a need to conquer the skyline. He had dinner with Leo every Thursday. He saw Lily every weekend. He had married his new partner, Catherine, in a small ceremony and seemed genuinely happy. Victoria Vance, age 42, was a senior partner at a law firm in New York. She never married or had children, but she found her purpose in reforming the very corporate systems she once exploited. She and Chloe were not friends, but they were allies in a shared fight. Victoria sent Chloe an encrypted email every year on the anniversary of the Ledger leak. The subject line was always the same: the day the blueprints changed. And her old mentor, Lillian, now 82, sat on her firm's advisory board. Sarah, her former colleague who now directed the foundation with Chloe's backing, had authored a memoir called "The Foundation We Build, The Cracks They Hide." It shot to the top of the bestseller list. Grace, now married to her longtime partner and a mother of 2 adopted sons, handled the foundation's daily operations, ensuring everything ran like clockwork. She and Chloe were like sisters, raising their families together, their friendship cemented in a shared fight for survival. Marcus Thorne continued to build his new legacy, a quieter, more thoughtful man than the world once knew. He had personally funded the construction of over 200 playgrounds for the children of the families the foundation had helped. Each one was a safe place for a new start. On the 10th anniversary of her flight, Chloe stood on a newly finished bridge in a Chicago park, where she had once watched Leo learn to walk. She had taken the day for herself, needing to mark the moment alone, to honor both the woman she was forced to be and the one she chose to become. Her mind drifted to that night 10 years ago, activating a secure transfer of the ledger files from their sterile penthouse. The gut-wrenching fear and desperate hope as the unmarked SUV pulled away. Hiding in a small apartment, the kindness of a retired architect, and giving birth to Leo during a historic Chicago blizzard. Every single decision had led her here. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from a number she didn't know. The encrypted text came through on her tablet. The sender was anonymous, but the fear was unmistakable. My husband is Miles Kendrick, the tech CEO. Everyone in Silicon Valley thinks he's a genius, but they don't see what he's like behind closed doors. I'm 32 weeks pregnant, and I have to leave. I found your name on an urban planning forum, a coded message about an architect who can draft a new floor plan for your life. Can you help me? In her serene Chicago office, surrounded by architectural models, Chloe's fingers paused over the screen. Her response was concise and coded. We have a consultation, open Thursday at 11 a.m. Your new blueprint is ready. You are not the first, and you will be safe. She gazed out at the Chicago skyline, a testament to resilience built from steel and glass. It reflected the strength of the women she helped. The world had forgotten the story of the architect who disappeared from her powerful husband's life. But the woman she became never stopped building escape routes, and she continued to design a path to freedom for others seeking a way out. The woman known as Chloe Thorne was a blueprint of the past. In her place stood a builder, a protector, and her life was a monument to every woman who dared to tear down the old walls and design her own future.